Ready?
Ready.
All right. I'm going to click start webinar. We're going to go, the webinar is now live. And we'll give it a moment for attendees. And what I'll say first, as we mentioned before, that the link may not have been correct on the agenda itself. So if anyone's on YouTube and wants to be able to log in for public comment, we've updated the link. If you go to the agenda and minutes section of the Board of Ed website, you will see right underneath the meeting, it's the link to the agenda is a revised Zoom link, and that will take you right in as an attendee. We'll give a moment for that. Okay. All right, Ms. Parkhill, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 1st, 2021 meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First up tonight is to approve our minutes from the January 25th meeting. Can I have a motion? Kenny, second. Jen, all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Next, I'd like to propose 2 amendments to our agenda this evening. First is to add a statement of accounts review and a possible action to approve transfers. The motion would be to approve the transfers reflected in the statement of accounts, which we'll discuss later. And the second is an update on the budget discussions with the Board of Finance by the Resources Committee, and there will be possible action there as well, and we'll discuss that under the budget update. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda? Kenny, second. Carl, all in favor? Okay, thank you. And is there a motion to approve the amended agenda? Deanna, second. Jen, all in favor? Okay, moving on, thank you. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. If there's anyone wishing to address the board, I would ask that you please raise your hand and Dr. Letzi will bring you over to speak.
Great. And as you if you do come over to speak, we just ask you to give your full name so that we had some feedback, I think, from the advertiser and other press before that they were trying to reconcile comments with folks. So we will start with Lauren. Okay, Lauren, I think you're all set.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Letzi.
Sure.
This is Laurennussbaum. I'm a mom of 3 NCPS students at South and at Saks. First, a very big and heartfelt thank you to Dr. Letzi, teachers, staff, and all of you on the BOE. I know that you too are living through the pandemic, and yet you've emerged as leaders and innovators. You are frontliners, and quite frankly, you're the most essential people in my life and my kids' lives. Because of you, my kids go to school every day, and that includes my daughter who's on the autism spectrum. So my gratitude to each one of you. I come tonight with news that I'm excited about. I'm here to introduce the coalition of parents and alumni, parents of alumni, and community members who are committed to ensuring that NCPS's annual diversity, equity, and inclusion goals are met or exceeded this year and in the years to come. This coalition has grown out of the inspiring work of our NCPS alumni group, which issued a letter, as many of you know, and petition on June the 7th, 2020, calling for real and lasting change to our culture and curriculum. This petition was signed by over 700 people. The initial and subsequent work of those alumni cannot be overstated. They and their work are why I'm here speaking tonight, and they are why this coalition grows every day. They have inspired a generation older than they are, of which I'm a part, and their courage and leadership inspires current NCPS students and the generation that's coming up behind them. The mission of this coalition is to support and partner with NCPS administrators, teachers, staff, and students in the implementation of the district's DEI goals and objectives, which, as you all know, were voted into existence at your September BOE meeting. We believe that these goals are of utmost importance and require immediate focus as we want to achieve our ultimate mission of preparing students and children to be global citizens in the incredibly—
2 minutes, sorry.
Okay, could I wrap up quickly, or do I need to just stop?
You can just, if you can wrap up super quick, that'd be great. Sorry.
This coalition considers our work and your work together as a journey that will create a lasting legacy of change and progress in our town and school system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Next up, we have Giacomo. There we go. Giacomo, if you unmute, you should be all right. Let's see.
Work?
There you go.
Perfect. Can you see me or no? I can see you, so that's what matters.
We can, no.
Okay, well, I'm here. Thank you. I'm just, for everybody knows, I have a dad, 2 kids in West, and 1 kid will be in pre-K, hopefully at West in the fall. So thanks for taking my question, and thank you for your service on behalf of the New Canaan community and all of its children. I understand the board, less one person, voted via the budget process rather than an independent vote to change school start times from the middle of academic year 2021-2022. As you know, I've supplied the board with a good deal of information regarding comparable elementary school start times at the local, regional, national, and even international level. If you're missing any of that data, let me know, and I'll be happy to send it again to you. The data shows, with very few exceptions, that a 7:45 a.m. start for elementary school children is an aberration. The few cases where you do see such a start time or earlier, you see a high correlation between milder weather and that location, such as the US South and Singapore. As you know, weather, latitude, time zone markers, for example, the panhandle, sunlight, and actual time of sunrise are linked very substantially to the issue of appropriate sleep for kids and related alertness for school. I and others have suggested a path for which we could find a solution for all kids and families in New Canaan to have a much better start time than what's been included in the budget or exists today, that could be implemented in the start of the 2022-2023 academic year. By doing this, we'd cause less disruption for the community compared with a mid-year implementation, lower costs for taxpayers, and the next fiscal year, improve community support for such a change, and also deliver a solution that helps all kids and families in the district. Have you considered this proposal? And if not, can you explain why you're so comfortable with having New Canaan elementary school kids start at 7:45 and why the disruption caused by mid-year implementation is so necessary?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Monica.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, you're all set.
Thank you very much. I actually am glad that, my name is Monica Kimera, by the way. I have 4 children, 1 at the high school, 1 at Saks, and 2 at West. So I have all the bases covered. I'm actually glad that Laurennussbaum spoke tonight, because I was actually going to inquire about where we were in terms of our, DEI goals that we have been discussing. I've had some wonderful conversations with West and Saks, the administrators there, and I do want to say that they are doing a fantastic job within the purview of, the curriculum that they have created, and I'm guessing what has been agreed on. I would just like to see something that's more intentional. And as a mom, as a person of color, and given that we've had New Canaan in an unflattering light recently in the news regarding some unfortunate comments that were made, I'm just wondering, when we're going to sort of jump on this. I'm sure that most of us aren't expecting to have a curriculum tomorrow. What we would like to see is, maybe a heads up that, for example, there's an HR headhunter out there looking for someone. There are also some resources out there. Pollyanna, I'm understanding, is something that some of the private schools are using here locally. There are so many resources out there, and I would just like to see a little bit more movement because I really feel like we don't have time to waste anymore. And I mean, what side of history do we want to be on as a school district? I would like to first say that everyone is doing a fantastic job. And I recognize that we are in really difficult circumstances with the pandemic, but you know, these sorts of things don't go away during COVID times. And I really feel that as a district, I would like to see personally what we're doing to move the ball forward ever so slightly, even if it's just a small amount. I mean, I think progress is progress. So that's it. That's my comment for today. Thank you very much for everything. I feel very grateful to be in this school district.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more hands up.
Okay, we'll move on to reports and recognition. We have a packed agenda this evening, so we'll move right into the first COVID update with Dr. Lutzy and the cabinet.
Yep, and we do have a full agenda. I will be brief. But I mentioned before with some folks that any conversation I have has to begin with vaccinations because that's just it's top of mind for just about everybody. So last Monday, as you know, the governor made an announcement of a change in the vaccine distribution protocols here in the state. They went to an age-based distribution instead of what they were using as 1B group, which was one of the reasons they moved was the 1B group consisted of over 1.3 million people. By the time we looked at it, that was essential workers, certain age, pre-existing conditions, other things, and it was getting larger and larger. And they realized by looking at other states and other things going on that they had to make a change. So they've shifted to age-based, and as you likely know, this morning, 55 and over became eligible. They also added or created eligibility for all school district staff, including, so everybody in a school district plus childcare providers, so daycare providers and other schools. This is private, parochial, public schools, all included. And in doing that, they've strongly encouraged the school districts to work with their local health departments to create what they're calling pods, so that the vaccinations for those that carve out in this group, that the school staff and others, is managed locally through a pod instead of putting them out into the general population in VAMs. That was intended to keep the supply flowing for the 55 plus at the pharmacies and at the hospitals and other places, so that school district personnel and others could do it at the pod. We have the amazing good fortune of both having Jen Eilman as our health director and having a great relationship with her in the health department. And so even before the announcement went public, Jen and I were talking, and we were also working through how could we make this work for our system and our community and do it as seamlessly as possible. So we went into it. Once we heard the announcement, we quickly thought, what are our goals in doing this? First and foremost, our goal was to take the stress out of the process for our staff so that they could focus on the things they need to focus on, teaching, caring for themselves, caring for each other, caring for our kids, doing those things. We didn't want this to become another stress in people's lives in our schools. We focus on equity of access to the vaccinations themselves, knowing that we've got some staff that are very computer savvy, that spend a lot of time in front of computer screens. We have other staff that maybe don't even have email addresses for all we know. It was what we've always said, that working in schools is a people business and a large operation with many different roles for people. We hire some people that they should never look at a computer screen while they're working in our schools, so it didn't seem right. We had to find a way to do this that didn't advantage one group and disadvantage another. We also wanted to make sure we minimize the disruption in our schools. We didn't want to disrupt class time. Every minute is as precious. As you know, we've done so much to show and to take advantage of every minute in the classroom. We value that above all else. So we didn't want to disrupt that if we could avoid it. And the last thing was we have to act fast, right? Things are changing quickly. We've got to keep up with those changes and put systems and processes in place that to kind of meet these goals. So what we've done is, and I'm enormously proud of sort of the approach and where we are, We went ahead and we identified all of our staff across the board. Now, this is everyone working in the schools. It's also substitute teachers. It can be coaches and others. I mean, this is really meant to hit everyone who works for a school district. So we created 2 lists, a full-time and a part-time list. And then within each list, we prioritized by age. And we filled it. We took the full-time list and filled in the appointments. And we scheduled them on Wednesday afternoons when school's not in session. Granted, it's a bit of a disruption to our professional learning time, but we had to make a choice, and that I think was the right one, to not disrupt the school day and to do it with those half days. We filled in the full-time list, and then we created a mechanism for people who have either already been vaccinated or are going to opt out for a variety of different reasons to be able to tell us that. So when they did, we then filled it in with a part-time. And so what we're able to do on our first clinic, we'll have 350 doses, and we're vaccinating just about, all the full-time and part-time staff down to about 46 years old or so. And we're still working and refining that list. So in that one week, we're able to get to a significant portion of our staff. The system that we have in place looks like, well, it might take 2.5 weeks or so for everybody who wants a vaccination to get one. And then we're also looking at what do we do with the second dose? And we're going to be scheduling those on Fridays because, as you know, we're looking at the Moderna vaccine for the most part, and folks are concerned about side effects after the second dose. So we'll do those on Fridays so that people can sleep in and relax on Saturday and keep their slippers on a little longer and hopefully get over any side effects that might hit them. To do the rollout, we held meetings with all of our faculty across the district. We went to faculty meetings at every building, talked to staff, opened it up for questions and answers, got their feedback. I've been talking with Jen throughout, of course, because what started at 300 doses became 350, and then some J&J doses showed up, and we're working to figure out all of these things. And things are moving quickly, and we're working hard to keep up with it all, and I think doing a great job. By scheduling people instead of letting them schedule themselves, we made sure that we didn't advantage any one group over the other, right? So people could opt out if they didn't want it, but we gave everybody an opportunity. We sent them emails with their appointments. We sent cards over to the schools that were handed out to people so that everybody had the card that had their appointment date on it. And if things change, we're actually making calls to them and speaking with them directly if the date changes or accelerates at this point. So we have, I'm thrilled with the way that we're addressing it. I think that people feel good knowing that they don't have to go into VAMS or into another system and go through the frustration. I spoke with somebody today who's in another district, and they had been trying since 6 o'clock this morning to get an appointment. The soonest they could get was June in the VAMS system. Fortunately, I was able to get them a phone number, and they made some calls, and they got into a large clinic up at Hartford, and they're still going to have to take the day off and go up there to do it. But this is what people are going through across the state, and we didn't want our staff member and no one in our district to have to go through that. So thanks to Jen and the health department, and just really amazing teamwork across the board. We are in a really good place. So on Wednesday we're going to be doing that at Lapham. We have stickers for everybody. I was vaccinated today, and we have a little banner that they can stand in front of to take a picture after they get vaccinated that says New Canaan Public Schools, I was vaccinated today. And of course it says onward exclamation point as well, because this is a milestone in this whole experience, I think, for all of us. And we're really excited to get going. I've been criticized a little bit in being a bit too energetic and happy about all of this. But we really want people to know this is a really wonderful thing. And I really hope that just about everybody will take advantage of the opportunity to go ahead and do this. So the vaccinations have been foremost on our minds, and that's a big turning point here with COVID and everything else that we've been experiencing. But I'm also thrilled to welcome our South principal and newly appointed assistant principal. Matt Kaskak has been our principal since the start of the year. He knew everything was going on with COVID, and he took the job anyway. He has, Matt was a longtime assistant principal. You all met Matt in the past. And after an illustrious career and Joanne retiring and John filling in for a year, Matt has jumped in and not only, sort of not missed a beat, but added some new beats to the rhythm as we continue moving forward. And Zoe, it was recently named our new assistant principal. I will share, I had a PTC president's meeting this morning where both PTC presidents from South wanted to personally to thank me for giving them Zoe. He said, thank you for giving us Zoe because we love her and she's already doing a great job. So the two of them together are our South administrative team. And we invited them here to give us a quick COVID update over at South. And Matt, I know that you are struggling with some laryngitis right now, which isn't great at any time, but probably even worse when we're in an all Zoom environment.
Exactly. So I'm not going to talk much. I'll turn it over to Zoe.
And Zoe is no stranger to the board, our math curriculum specialist extraordinaire for the last 7 years, I guess, or so. Yeah.
I love any chance to talk to the board. So,
so tell us, how's it going at South?
So I just wanted to start by saying good evening and thank you for the opportunity for us to share a quick COVID update with all of you. I know that Matt's going to share his screen as I talk through some of the slides. The planning began in the summer and the team worked together as an elementary team, which included the three principals, Dr. Correnti, Dr. Keaton, Dan Clark, Janet Reed, and others, and they were guided by the Charting Our Course document. They considered everything from physical space, both interior and exterior, scheduling, furniture, materials, storage, etc. They identified key areas that required consistency across the three buildings for alignment with the Charting Our Course plan. And then, of course, we needed to address issues that were unique to South School. The key to successfully getting students back to school was making sure we consistently implemented the virus mitigation practices of mask wearing, social distancing, increased hand washing and sanitizing, and enhanced cleaning protocols. We monitor these practices daily and closely, and we include appropriate reminders in our morning announcements as well as our daily bulletins. As a result, we are very fortunate and proud to report that the success of our planning and hard work of everyone who works at South, along with the support from so many others around the district, we have only had 4 individuals test positive for COVID this year, resulting in 3 different class cohorts quarantining and learning remotely for the required 14-day period or shorter. These remote periods of learning were highly successful, as evidenced by feedback from teachers, students, and parents involved. As we look at slide 1 and we focus in on it, we see classrooms in action. Some of the bigger challenges in classrooms related to sitting in rows, especially in grades 2 through 4. No carpets, less use of shareable materials, and getting creative about how to provide opportunities for differentiated learning through one-to-one, peer, and small group learning instruction. We reduced what was in classrooms to only essential furniture to allow for as much space to spread students out as much as possible. We replaced small group tables and centers with more portable seating options that could also be sanitized, like cube chairs and rubber floor squares. And they can be carried easily by all children to outside spaces when weather allowed for it. We also added see-through trifold dividers to many classrooms where plexiglass dividers were not installed. We repurposed space, including the special classrooms, to serve as small group instructional space. At other times, these rooms were also used by classroom teachers for planning time when their classrooms were being used, and they can also be used for smaller meetings when participants were able to spread out. On the second slide, we show a shift in focus to specials and other programs and activities that go beyond the classroom. For example, passing in hallways is limited since students have specials mostly in classrooms, but we made changes to passing expectations. Primarily, students walk single file down the center of the hallway on the blue plot print stickers placed on the floor to indicate the 6-foot social distancing spacing. The students do well with this, but need occasional reminders. And when 2 classes converge, they shift to the left and right side to pass. We also have the blue print stamps outside on the bus loop. We had to consider new patterns for having students entering and leaving the building as well, and alternative lunch spaces, alternative staging plans to load buses in the afternoons. Cafeteria capacity has been reduced, so some classes eat in their rooms and in the lobby outside of their cafeteria on rotation. Specials are held in the classroom. and the PTC was very gracious in supplying individual recess bags for each child with a variety of play items the kids can engage with that do not need to be shared. Materials that are shared in the classroom, like classroom library books, go through a 48-hour no-touch quarantine cycle. As you can see in the slide, there's a picture with Valentine bags and library books that are undergoing quarantine. As we transition into the third slide, South School would not be South School without some of the traditional events and activity that make our school community unique. On this slide, you will see that COVID has not held us back from engaging in a variety of extracurricular activities. We have had Walk to School Day, fire safety presentations for our K-1 classes from the New Canaan Fire Department, our annual readathon, a Veterans Day virtual program, community service projects, when there's a picture with a van loaded with donated supplies for schoolhouse apartment residents, and our 100-day activity for kindergarten. Our kindergarten teachers wore shirts that in the front said, "I crushed 100 days of teaching kindergarten," and on the back had things that said such as 100 days of wearing masks, shields, Purell, 6 feet apart, etc. We have also had virtual author visits and performing art programs. Lastly, and certainly not least, the one-to-one technology model from kindergarten up has been critical to making this year work for all students, and the early release Wednesday schedule has allowed faculty and staff to continue engaging in meaningful professional learning, dialogue, and work time to meet the challenges of the circumstances of the pandemic, while continuing to meet the needs of our students. We thank you for your continued support, and we are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I thought Dave got a lot of pictures on his slides. That's great. Any questions or feedback for Matt or Zoe? Certainly a challenging time to transition into a new role, but as you can see, they doing a wonderful job.
Deanna?
So first, let me say thank you for, all the hard work and keeping our kids in school. I think it really is a testament to our district and all the amazing staff and that we have in this district. So thank you. I wanted to actually ask, are there takeaways that you can share with us at this point of things that you have implemented this year specifically for COVID that you think will, be important moving forward? That they'll continue on, and they were implemented specifically for COVID.
I could try to answer that. Having the seesaw management system along with Google Classroom has really helped teachers be able to differentiate a lot more. They're using Seesaw to load activities that meet students' needs. They're allowing students to show what they've learned or know in different ways. So the assessment is being differentiated. So if there's a student who doesn't like to write, they may be able to show the teacher they understood what they need to understand by doing a recording and submitting that to the teacher through Seesaw. Mm-hmm. So the technology has been, excuse me, the technology has been really wonderful.
And I think I would add, and we're going to hear actually about this as our next agenda item, but over at West, but the outdoor learning. We started going outside and spreading kids outside because of COVID and need for more room and fresh air and ventilation, and continue to find, certainly not right now, but when the weather's nicer, that students really take to it very well. They can be outside and still be learning and doing their work and doing their things. And this is K-12. So finding new creative ways to integrate the outdoors as an educational space is another one.
Kenny.
Deanna's, I think.
Sorry, I forgot. Just one other follow-up, because we didn't get to ask questions on your COVID or the vaccination update. What percentage uptake are you seeing in the district with our staff with the vaccine?
I think the approach we took, I think, is going to help with that. We're seeing very good, actually. We've had some cancellations, but many of them have said it's because they already have appointments or they have something elsewhere. So I don't have a percentage at this point, but I can say that we certainly are higher than the numbers that I've seen reported out where people talk about 60, 70, or even 80%. I think we're higher than that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Penny?
And I mean, I can't help it but to share. I mean, we've also had people crying and breaking down in tears and sending really very nice notes and other things because of the impact that it will have on their professional life and their personal life. You know, people crying that they'll be able to hug their grandchildren for the first time in over a year. You know, things like that. So it's moving.
So I just wanted to say thank you for all the work, the amazing work you've done in having the students back in school and learning and progressing. And I guess I was, you know, when I was hearing the reports last spring, you know, I definitely had the impression we were doing terrific work, but we weren't really getting as much instruction in as we would have liked when we were, you know, all remote. And so I was wondering, in terms of the instructional pace this year, if you thought that it was sort of a standard year and we were covering as much, or if there was going to be a little bit of a gap as we came out of the pandemic that we would have to plan for and you know, try and fill in as best as we could, or you know, where we were on that scale.
Jill, do you want to speak to that a little bit about just across the three buildings?
Sure. We've had to adjust the curriculum. We've had to go back and look at our units of study. We've identified what we call priority standards. So we're not doing away with a unit of study, but the units of study are taking more time to get covered. And so what we've done is we've kind of collapsed what the standards are within that unit of study so that we're still hitting priority standards and knowing that there's other units where we can circle back to those kind of secondary standards. To help pace, but we are noticing that, you know, it is taking a little bit longer to accomplish all that we want to accomplish. And that's just, I think, you know, everything takes longer when you have people that are coming into your classroom for specials and then they leave your classroom, the transition times, it takes longer to move kids in the building. And this is really K-8 because our middle schools operate like an elementary school. You know, they're walking them to the gym, they're walking them back from the gym, they're walking them to the cafeteria, they're walking them back. So all of that takes more time for transitions, which obviously then cuts into that instructional time. And so I think that, you know, we've been working really hard on those priority standards, and I think we're assessing kids and we're monitoring their progress to assure that all kids are moving forward. And I think that's what's most important. So we know the standards that we're teaching, we know the standards that we're spiraling back to, and we're continuing to assess the kids so that we have good data. And we're going in, we're working with individuals, with small groups to close gaps and to help them to progress and to move forward.
Great. That's thank you for everything you're doing, and still the level of differentiation and you know, focus on every single student in the district, I think is going to stand us in good stead.
Any other questions or comments? I just wanted to add, you know, welcome to Zoe, congratulations. And Matt and Zoe, is great to see. I love seeing the pictures from all of the changes that take place. You know, when you're used to imagining classrooms one way and then you get to see what they look like today and all of the innovation and creativity and just seeing the COVID operations plan come to life. It's really amazing, and we're just so proud of all of the great work that continues to happen every day. And I consistently hear, you know, at all ages K through 12, just how improved the remote learning is over, you know, what we had next spring. I mean, obviously there was a lot of time to think about it, but just in terms of the tools and the approach and just the overhaul that took place in a short amount of time. So I commend you all for that great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we'll move on to West School and the Outdoor Learning Center with Mrs. Murphy and the PTC.
Okay, I just had Zoe and Matt go back to being attendees, and now I'm going to move Jan over as a panelist. And she's coming. think. There we go. Hey, Jen.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I had a little trouble with my my laptop tonight, so I'm on my phone.
That's okay. Are you, or will you be joined by anyone?
Well, I thought our two PTC presidents, but I'm not sure if you
Oh,
can see
there they are. Yep.
Erica.
They just,
Lauren,
Erica and Lauren. Yep. They just raised their hands.
Right.
That was a good idea. Brought them right to the top. Very good. Okay, and Jan, if you are on your laptop, would you like me to share the presentation for you then?
If you don't mind, that would be great.
Not at all.
So I just want to start just by saying good evening to everyone. I wanted to introduce our two phenomenal PTC presidents. They've been such great partners through this whole school year with COVID, and really so instrumental with getting this outdoor learning center up and going. Erica Schwedel is one of our co-presidents, and then Lauren Erickson is the other. And I'd also like to publicly thank Mr. Michael Canaro, who is the sort of the brains behind the design for the Outdoor Learning Center. He's one of our parents, and he's been very instrumental in coordinating and listening to all of our crazy ideas and then really bring it to life. So I wanted to thank him as well.
Okay, so I think I can do that for you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. And I wanted to put the qualifier on the picture that the picture was actually taken on September 13th of 2019, prior to COVID. That's why you see no masks and the kids sitting so closely together. But this was just a photo op after we finished our phase one, sort of a celebration to show parents what it looked like. So just before I get started, very, very quickly, we had a group of teachers who came together a couple of years ago and said, you know, our outdoor learning center is looking really tired. You know, what can we do? What do we want to use the space for? And I just put an email out and said, anyone who's interested in coming together and having a conversation. So it kind of started as just a very informal conversation. And what's ended up with, we've ended up with our vision, which is to design a space for kids that promotes collaboration, which is, you know, the way of the future, 21st century skills, critical thinking, opportunities for kids to go outside and problem solve and have really clearly defined spaces for kids to work. We wanted it to be an extension of our outdoor learning spaces, our indoor learning spaces, I'm sorry. And then we wanted it to provide unique educational experiences and spaces for kids. And we really wanted to think about the habits of mind and dispositions. Wouldn't it be great if kids go outside and sit in a chair in the sun and just read or have a book talk with a group of friends? So little did we know, fast forward to 2021, here we are, and COVID happened. And our outdoor learning center this fall was probably the one thing that really got us through the fall. Just having that outdoor space for kids to use, for adults to use, was really, really just a great thing. So moving on, as you can fast forward the slide, back in 2018, 2019, we developed a vision. We came up with how we saw the space being used, and then we established what we call design criteria and the scope for the full space. Part of the problem that we had was we wanted the design to be sustainable and maintainable, something that was low maintenance. One of the problems in the space was that we get a lot of bees because of the grass inside. The grass would get overgrown very frequently. And we were in the midst of our school climate work where we were trying to work with buddy classes and have our older kids working with younger kids. So we wanted a space where we could do that. There was an existing greenhouse in the space. We wanted to incorporate that into the design. We wanted to make sure that it was ADA compliant to provide equity for all students. We wanted to provide shade. And so what you're about to see is sort of our vision coming to life stage by stage.
In the summer of 2019, we implemented what we call phase one, which was the classroom you see on the right, the courtyard and the greenhouse areas. And in November, I believe, or maybe it was October, we put up the shade structure, the blue structure you see on the right-hand side. So that provided a great space in the fall when we had limited spaces inside where people could spread out. We actually miss it this winter, not being able to go out there, but that's sort of what phase one looks like right now. And then the next slide just shows some of the spaces that were used during COVID. Kids outside taking breaks, planting seeds in the greenhouse, just sitting and having conversations with one another outside. You can see in the bottom left picture. Another thing that our PTC did was they bought stools for kids to sit on outside. So this is a group of students having a mask break, but a working mask break, also doing some work, having a book talk or a book discussion as well. And then one of the wonderful things our PTC did was they came in on a Wednesday afternoon when the kids were gone and they decorated the outdoor learning space for the kids with pumpkins and colorful mums. So it really transformed the place and the space into an amazing fall environment for us. So in the next slide, you can sort of see the different phases. On the left-hand side of the slide, you see that's phase one. That I just showed you the picture of that with the blue shade. Over to the right is what we're calling phase two. And so for phase two, this is where we envision having some type of a performance stage with a pergola over it, and with a seating area so that two classes, our goal is always to have two classes be able to work and enjoy the space together. Rubber tiles under the seating area so that it's a safe environment and not grass. And we're calling that the hardscape. And then phase two is also including the landscape for the project. And so for phase two, here's sort of a design rendering of a picture of the staging area or what it might look like. And this is going to be a place where kids could come out and do performances, or after perhaps reading a book, acting out a favorite part of a story. We just keep brainstorming different ways that this can be used outside. We also, an area which is near to my heart is the reading circle. I think it's the next one, the next slide. Oh, maybe, yeah, there you go. The reading circle, which is an area where we envision kids going outside and having book talks. We have parents who come in, well, they don't come into the building anymore, they Zoom, but who hold nutmeg book clubs before school with our kids. So this is an area that they, at maybe sometime in the future, can use it for that purpose as well. A place for kids to read, to collaborate, for kids to just come out and have conversations. And the great thing about the space is that it's completely enclosed within the school, so it can't be reached by anyone outside of the building. So this is what it looks like. So moving on to phase one, which we've completed. We got approval from the Board of Ed for phase one, and now we're here this evening to sort of review what the costs are for phase two. And I'm not sure if it's Erica or Lauren who's going to go over the cost estimates, but I'll up to you, Erica. Okay.
Yes. Hi. So first of all, I wanted to thank all of you for inviting myself and Lauren Erickson to come tonight and present to you. And also, as I said to Dr. Lutzu this morning, I am a regular attendee for Board of Education meetings. And I really do see firsthand how much time and effort all of you put into working with the administration, supporting our teachers, putting our kids first, and also listening to the community and to all of our families. So I just want to take a moment and say, thank you for everything that all of you do. As far as this project goes, as Jan said, phase one has been, a tremendous success and a great use to the building. And now we're hoping to implement phase two this summer. Here's a little bit of detail about the underlying costs that are a part of phase two. So we broke it down. We have the hardscape, which has the pathway. So there are two entrances to the courtyard. And this will be the pathway from the southern entrance, as well as the pathway to split off to the stage area. We're also putting down rubber tiles underneath the stage seating area to create a comfortable space for kids to sit. The stage and pergola is a significant cost for us. The stage itself is running about $10,000, and then the pergola runs closer to 20. And so, you know, being able to implement those and have a little bit of cover in the space as well for both sun and for inclement weather. And then the reading circle, one of Jan's favorites. You know, to be able to implement, put the paving down, put a structure around it to really define the reading circle space. There is landscaping costs involved in this. You know, we're planning to expand our perimeter plantings and the irrigation that we started with phase 1. And then we also have our, you know, our project management fees. We are using a project manager who's actually a former West School mom herself, who's just been really, you know, so helpful in, you know, ushering the project through and coordinating with our campus monitor and with Dan Clark and with everybody that, you know, we need to connect with in order to do the work really efficiently, because, you know, the summer is a rather short period to do a big piece of work. And so, you know, she's been very helpful to make that happen. So those are the details behind the ask for today. And then Lauren is going to speak a little bit about phase 3, which we're not bringing in front of the board today, but we wanted to have on your radar, since you know, the two phases that we have done and the one that we're planning to do now are standalone and will provide great value. But you know, this is a part of a larger plan, and so we are looking to complete phase 3 at some point soon as well.
All right, great. So jumping in here, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak briefly tonight about this project. We've been working hard on it, and we're very excited to be bringing it to you. As you saw from both the drawing that Jan showed of the space and what's here on the screen, phase 3 is kind of right in the middle. It's going to be the space linking phase 1 and phase 2 via a walkway that'll connect both entrances to the courtyard. Within that space, we envision a labyrinth with potentially a sculpture, possibly a whale in it, as well as a meditation and reading garden with some seating areas and additional landscaping. We're approaching the end of our fundraising for this phase, which, you know, while we aren't coming to you tonight for approval, we are hoping that we'll be back soon in order to complete it in the summer of 2021, if possible. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again.
Great. And then I did share the presentation with the board as well. And so the appendix has the vision usage design criteria that Jan had been talking about. As I shared with Erica, Lauren, and Jan earlier, I loved this idea 3 years ago, when the idea germinated, and it was an idea whose time had come. Certainly, definitely seeing that space used all throughout. So it's exciting to think about this next phase, and you know, I'd love to be part of the brainstorming work to think about how you can use that stage, because as an English teacher, I used to always bring students down to the auditorium or find other spaces for performance. And it's just a whole nother dimension of bringing learning to life with kids. With that, we have an action item later in the agenda, but while Lauren, Erica, and Jan are here, if there are any questions or feedback or thoughts.
Yes, well, it looks like a couple questions, but I just want to say a huge thanks. I mean, this is phenomenal, and the possibilities are endless, and it's going to make such a positive impact on our learning community and our school and our students. So thank you. Brendan?
Yeah, I really wanted to echo that. Thank Lauren and Erica and Jan and, you know, the PTC and all those who have contributed. It's a huge gift, obviously, for the community, and all the, you know, forethought and planning that went into this is impressive. So thank you all for the hard work.
Jen?
I would say the same thing. This is amazing. It's going to be such a gift to all of our kids. And just thanks to you guys for all the work you've put into it and to all the parents that have donated. I just have a quick question because I know a long time ago we did a project like this at Saks, and hopefully for the future, this is going to, we're going to be able to do this at all the schools. I know some of them have something like it, but who maintains it? Because I know that was kind of an issue at Saks at one point, like making sure that like the grass is cut, because I know it's probably not that easy to get stuff in there. Is that, I'm just wondering, is that funded by the town or is that from the school budget? Just to make sure that like once it's done, that it's like, maintained. And
so that was one of the design criteria, was that we wanted it to have as low maintenance as possible. So there really isn't going to be any grass in the space. It's all going to be hard surface or the rubber tiles that are under the seating area. There are some grasses, landscape grasses that are around, that are going to be surrounding the perimeter, and that is something that the custodians can. I think they have to be clipped down in the fall, but it's pretty low maintenance as far as cutting grass and things like that. And the walls are permanent structures. So that was probably our biggest design challenge, was trying to make sure that in the future, those kinds of things, like exactly those kinds of things, were not going to become problems with the design. Did that answer your question?
yes, yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. As Dr. Lutzy said, we'll be approving the, there'll be almost the donation a little bit later on in the meeting, but thank you again. This is very exciting. I remember it was just an idea as we were graduating from West, and it's just been really exciting. And I got to walk through it this summer, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it'll be exciting to see it come together in this next phase. So thank you again to all the parents and everyone who's been part of this effort.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move Lauren, Erica, Jan back to attendees.
Okay. Hi, thank you.
Where we can be sure that Erica will stay to watch the rest of the meeting. There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to, we're getting one at a time. And then I'm going to bring Principal Bill Egan back over.
Yep, time to pivot to the high school.
Yeah, we're covering a lot of ground tonight.
Yes, so next up is the block schedule survey results.
Well, he's coming over. Okay. Hello, Mr. Egan.
Hello, Dr. Lutzy. Hi, board. Hi, everybody else.
Okay, I'm going to jump into sharing the results of the block schedule survey, and we'll talk through that quickly. And then glad to, of course, open up any Q&A, and Bill is here to help with that as well. And Dr. Krenti has been very involved with this from the start too. So Jill, feel free to jump in at any time or add anything that I might miss. Here we go. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Good, okay. So as you will recall, last year when we transitioned to remote learning, we sort of evolved in our practice over time. We closed our schools, believe it or not, March 11th. So we're coming up just about on that 1-year anniversary of closing the schools. We transitioned into remote learning on Friday the 13th, March 13th. And then we remained in remote throughout the course of the year, as you recall. So as we were doing this more and more, we learned quite a bit about what was working, what wasn't, and we were committed to continuously evolving. And one of the changes we made in the spring that has stuck was the shift to a block schedule. We did it for a variety of reasons. I won't rehash all of that, but when we began this year, knowing that we'd be facing challenges with COVID, and that one of our goals was to reduce the cohorting at the high school, we opened the year and have spent this year in a block schedule. one of the reasons, and there's several, but one of the reasons that we thought it was the right thing to do from a health and safety standpoint was by being in a block schedule, students are in the most 4 periods a day, meaning they're around 4 other groups of kids. In our traditional schedule, they could have been in 7 periods per day. So it would reduce potential exposures if and when positive cases arose. And we did find that that was helpful in our managing of COVID, certainly early on, and even continues to be. So it was one of several reasons why we wanted to, why we put in place this year. And we have, we're committed to continuing it for next year in some form, with the understanding that we want to continue to learn, to receive feedback, to speak with our staff, our students and parents, and to, sort of, again, continuously evolve. So the board, as this was in the district goals, and as Bill had his presentation earlier in the year to the board, we wanted to do a survey to get some benchmark data, some sort of baseline data. We recognizing that we're just experiencing this in a different kind of way. When we asked the questions about block schedule, we were still in a traditional hybrid, right? We brought in the 75% hybrid after the break. It was a couple of weeks into January. So school wasn't what school would traditionally be. But we also expected that we could get some meaningful feedback, and we did by getting a quick snapshot of what was happening with our kids, what their feedback was, our teachers and their parents. So I'm just going to quickly move through. We wanted the feedback, not just from an academic perspective, but we wanted to understand their perceptions of the block schedule related to their academic wellness, certainly, but also mental, physical, and emotional wellness. We wanted to get a sense of people's perception of its impact on that instruction, learning, and involvement in extracurriculars. We also wanted to look at personal routines and needs, and even around school start times, because we know that there's an intersection here. If we're going to make a change on the long-term in block schedule, we would do it only if we were relatively confident that would also improve the emotional wellness of our kids. So we wanted to look at that dimension as well. So we administered the survey in December. We received the feedback back and forth with Hanover. We had a couple of calls with them to go through it. It's important to note we do this with our partner, with Hanover, so they do the analysis for us and go through it. We certainly talk with them and work through it, but we think it's also important to use an external partner when doing this type of work, because they also bring their own. They have a whole library of research around this and experience with other districts, and they're able to add value to the work that we're doing. So the methodology that we followed is pretty common. It's a similar methodology to what we used with Hanover throughout. We are still looking at some of the more precise sorts of analyses, such as the open-ended responses, and looking at the data supplement itself to try to develop some more understanding. But the results were pretty informative for us. So they came away with 3 large recommendations, or 3 primary recommendations, I guess is the right way to say it, a better way. They are, first, to consider permanent adoption of the block schedule at New Canaan High School, because of the perception from all stakeholders that it has a positive impact across the board. The second is to provide teachers with strategies, help them to learn how to best succeed in the block schedule itself. You'll see some of the feedback was around pace of learning, pace of the day, and in Hanover's feedback around that is that through some professional learning, teachers can change the structure of the classroom a bit. And then their third recommendation was to drill a little further into grade 10. For some reason, folks responding from grade 10, kids and parents and teachers, all felt a little more negative towards all of this than the other 3 grades. The middle recommendation around the professional learning certainly is aligned with our understanding of where we are. If you'll recall, we were talking about doing some more work last spring and sort of refining and developing a proposal with the expectation of spending this year as a professional learning year for our staff, and looking for implementation in 21-22. So of a change, whatever that ultimately was going to be. So we had to expedite that, right? We had to shorten the professional learning time and dive right in. And so that certainly aligns with our understanding of sort of where we were or where we are. Just briefly, some key takeaways. The instruction and learning, of course, first and foremost, that's the driver as we look at impact on kids. And we find that, again, this is a baseline for us and some of what we might have expected going in. Students find it very beneficial for their managing homework. And when you look at these graphs, I think it's important to note that the gray area is no effect, right? So sometimes when your methodology, you use a 4-point scale, sometimes you use a 5, they use the 5. So the managing homework, for instance, you're really only looking at maybe 12, I don't know exactly how many are in the red there, maybe it's 14, 15% who felt negatively about it. The other 85% or so had said either no effect or even better, you know, the 70% saying it had a positive or a very positive effect on their managing homework. And that makes sense. It's intuitive because they've got 4 classes a day instead of the 7 that they used to have. But as you look down and look at each of these questions, I think you generally find a positive impact. And the one that you don't is the one focus in class on the bottom. And that again speaks to the professional learning and the structure and design of the classes, you know, for student engagement in that. So that's the first piece. Again, I'm just going to move quickly. Glad to take questions or understanding. Again, this is baseline. Academic performance itself, you know, has it had a positive impact, no impact, or a negative impact? Again, you're looking at 20% saying negative or very negative. The other 80%, 31% of that has none. But you've got almost 50% saying that it had a positive or a very positive effect on them. The pace of the day, you know, that's something again through professional learning and classroom design and instructional design would be improved. But you still see the largest majority of folks responding that they felt the pace was just right. And again, you see what we're talking about, who the groups are that we're talking about. For the staff, asking them about the positive impact throughout their day and their work and their time. Almost 2/3 said that block scheduling has a positive or very positive effect on their ability to complete work during the school day. Okay, their ability to try new teaching strategies. And we certainly have been doing plenty of that this year, you know, given the pandemic and everything that we've been working through. So new teaching strategies, differentiated instruction, that is an improved opportunity for that, which again is intuitive, but it's nice to see see it reinforced by the findings. Okay. The student emotional wellness, which has been very obviously a goal of the board for years, and something that we focused on even more significantly in the last couple. And of course, the pandemic brings it all to the fore. There's pretty widespread agreement that it's had a positive effect on physical and emotional well-being, autonomy and independence, feeling well rested, students' ability to engage in physical activity. There's emotional wellness around all of this. There's the transition. Jill mentioned before about transitions. When you go to a block schedule, you have many fewer transitions in your day for kids. As you can imagine, remember sitting back in class, if you were in a schedule that had 7 or 8 periods a day, you are, each time you're going into a class, you're going into a new environment with a different set of peers, with a different teacher, with somewhat different expectations and different content as you go. And that in and of itself, that sort of, that pace can be very draining on many, many kids. It's difficult to navigate that day as you're navigating the expectations of teachers and the different peer groups that as you're moving in and out and whatever. This slows it down. And by reducing the transitions, one of the positive outcomes of that is a reduction in that stress, just of sort of thinking about the next period or transitioning into the new period. And it gives time for more authentic relationships to develop between students and each other and students and teachers, because again, you have a more extended period of time to spend together. There weren't many findings about extracurricular activities. As you can see, the gray is no effect. But I think it's fair to say since we've had to curtail so many of these experiences due to COVID, it'd be really hard for students to be able to answer this question in any meaningful way. Only, again, the clubs are different, things are different now. And we were thinking about it being in the block this year. For our 10th grade students, they had half a year of the traditional schedule. And for all of our 9th grade students, this is all they've known, right? So the point of comparison, not easy. We asked them to take a look at sleep-in days, just to get some feedback. We figured if we're talking to the kids and their parents about how they're using that time, let's just find out, you know, how it might be used. Because if they have a free block in the morning, that's not that different than what we're talking about with our school start times a little bit, with changing that. So how might they use that time right now for the sleep-ins? And you can see positive or very positive effect. Sufficient sleep, traffic in the morning, time for the homework, family routine. Students seem to be using that time well. And then that's what we asked the kids, and then we asked their parents, and their answers mirrored that a bit. Most said the kids sleep longer, which is a goal, and then use some time for homework and some other things. You see that there. This is helping to kind of inform the decision that Bill and his team is making over there around next year's block schedule. Because as you may recall, the schedule that exists now has, each day has 2 rotations, like an AM and a PM rotation, so that if you have a study hall or a free block in the PM spot, it never finds its way to first period. You never get a sleep in. So what they're actually looking at is a full day rotation, so that if you have a free period, you would get a sleep in at least once over the course of the 8 days. And then conversely, if you only, in the current schedule, if you have only an AM study hall, you never get a leave early at the other side of the day. So this balances that out on both sides for kind of a full rotation there, so that the sleep-ins would move around. We also expanded students' ability to leave campus this year, as you know. Again, it was driven by our desire to keep the numbers of students and the density of students in the building down a bit where possible. Many of our students, almost 2/3 of our or 3/4 of our students, are leaving the school when they have an opportunity to. The question about what effect is that having, and it had some positive effects according to the feedback from students and parents. Some homework time helps for traffic, when you see that right there, physical activity, other things. It does turn out, as you would expect, that most of the people that are leaving are seniors, and it goes down grade by grade. Of course, that's most likely availability of transportation, right, a car. But I want to really give credit to Bill and his team. This was another COVID strategy. We've had an open campus. We worked to develop a plan to extend that just a bit to this year, to help with the density in the building, and it is making an impact, and it's helping by, when students have those blocks free. And we've always said that as students get older, we give them more privileges, and they accept greater responsibility for what they do with those privileges. And if that doesn't work out the way we want, then they lose those privileges. That's how it works. But it's a good opportunity for us to continue teaching them, because as we know, they'll be off soon enough on their own. So the very data dense here. I'm not going to certainly walk through all of it, but it's, I think, a nice summary as we look at it. Homework management across the board was the highest positive. The others talked about sufficient sleep, pace of the school day. You can see, again, that top line number is the all-in, everybody combined, positive or very positive. The only grain of salt with this is it doesn't show the size of the no impact. So that can just sway it a little bit. We talked to them about taking the no impact out, but they didn't feel methodologically they could do that and keep the validity of the results, the accuracy of the results. So, but you can see, homework management, sufficient sleep, pace, emotional well-being, academic performance, all of those things, as you go down, they all look worthwhile, as the block schedule being positive or very positive influence on those things. And again, this is, these are the drawbacks, right? So the other side of the coin. So pace of the day, quality of instruction. But again, we don't have the middle ground, so it's a little tricky there. And these are the kinds of things that we would work through with professional learning. And while pace of the student emotional well-being stress, at 19% is the third highest respondent, that means 80% is elsewhere, either no impact, positive, or very positive. And so I think that that's a positive sign that we're on the right track. And just if you'd like to see what the breakdown is, after data cleaning, because they go through and they've got their own tools to be sure people aren't responding more than once, things like that. So 863 respondents, 48% of whom were students, 41% parents, guardians, and 10% staff. We had 90 staff members respond, which is pretty solid in a certified staff of about 120. Okay. And that's it. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions, thoughts. I will share that we have been talking with Hanover about next steps and really want to continue designing a process that can capture feedback from the high school staff, from the students and the parents. We've had some conversation about focus groups and other things, but as we sort of continue to learn and to consider how best to shape this going forward, we want to make sure that everybody's voice is a part of the conversation.
Brendan.
Thanks.
Thanks. This is really helpful. It's one of the benefits of being able to try this out during the past year or so, as we get to see all these results. One question I have is, having one high schooler with bigger kind of chunks of free time, have we seen in other districts that have moved to the block schedule, sort of requests to take up that time with other things, or have other districts done that, whether it's clubs or other things? I realize it's tough because those time periods fall at different times for different kids, but anything that we should be thinking about in that regard?
Bill, I see you went off mute. If you'd like to start, feel free.
Honestly, right now, everybody, for the most part in our DERG, is in the same boat with at least implementing the block schedule for this pandemic time period. So people were kind of in the same spot with that. The idea behind having that time is really actually supposed to be a luxury for kids, that they can use the time, hopefully wisely, to engage in their work so that they're better prepared and hopefully aren't as overloaded as we've had reports of in the past. And truthfully, I think that's one of the biggest positives that came out of this survey, was that students, and really almost everybody, unilaterally felt this was a benefit to kids for getting their work done.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd say that, and we wouldn't find that other districts, whether in our DERG or elsewhere, have sort of taken up those chunks of free time. But it's clear that kids and parents and staff. I was actually impressed on the staff piece, the emotional health on the staff front, the responses on that. I was kind of amazed that they were so high. But thank you for the answer.
Julie.
Thanks. So one question I had, in terms of thinking about professional development for teachers, I know you had mentioned, Brian, that, the plan pre-COVID had been to kind of spend this year doing additional or even preliminary kind of teaching of the teachers for how to teach in a block schedule, because it is different, and we see from the results that the pacing, that is one of those questions. So I'm just wondering what the plan is, assuming that we do go forward with this, continuing with this at the high school next year. Is the idea for professional development just to get it in, kind of concurrently with the teaching, because it is different teaching a 45-minute class versus an hour and a half class. So I'm just curious what sort of the plan is for that in terms of additional development for the teachers.
Sure. Dr. Cranty, would you like to?
Sure. So one of the ideas that we had as we're working with Hanover was to really do some qualitative focus groups with staff to really get a good insight as to what would they like for professional learning. What are areas that they would like to grow in? What are areas that they might be struggling in? What are areas that they're feeling really successful? And it would be where you mix the departments so they get to hear each other's feedbacks. But that's really the next step, is to have a focus group so that we can really then differentiate the professional learning that we provide for the staff. And I think that's key, because I do think people in different departments are using the time differently. And I think some are finding it very successful. Others might still be struggling. And how do we learn from one another? And then how do we differentiate to bring everybody along? So as much as we differentiate for our students, we also need to differentiate for our staff when it comes to professional learning. Okay, thank you.
I also would say that ultimately, we definitely need to hear from our staff, from all of them, about what their needs are. But additionally, I think another benefit to all this is they kind of went through it once, so you can refine what they did this year and really kind of work on their skill set based off what they did this year, and that's going to be a huge benefit for them as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely.
We also need to remember that they're still trying to figure out the whole hybrid. You know, as much as it's been a year, you know, having students remote and students in your class, that's a whole shift in your pedagogy as well. So,
very impressive.
Jen?
So just to follow up on that a little bit, Jill, I think that's really great, the differentiating the professional learning. I think that's so important. I'm wondering, are there like certain subjects that seem to be, you know, like I would think like language would be like, you know, maybe more difficult than like, are you seeing that in different types of courses that teachers are struggling more, or is it just, do you think, based on, you know, the teacher per se?
You know, in my experience, and I think the point about it being hybrid is important, because we're in a whole new environment, right? We're live streaming to some kids and teaching those in front, and there's, you know, a whole nother layer on top. It can be, I think we have a little more flexibility in your content. It may be a little bit of an easier transition. So like the humanities may be an easier transition. Because of the sort of the flexibility in what you do with kids and project-based and little different things. But that being said, I think I've seen every discipline. I think every discipline could be highly successful in this with some strategies. You know, some just might adapt a little easier than others, but with the right training and right strategies, I think that I don't think it is a detriment to anyone. I don't think any discipline thrives on 47 minutes every day or 7 out of 8 days versus, you know, a block every other day. You know, I think that it's only by virtue of what we do with the time that would dictate that, in my experience in doing this.
Do you foresee going forward, like if we implement the block schedule next year, do you foresee keeping the Wednesdays just as a ability to continue the professional learning on like half-day Wednesdays? Like, do you see that continuing, or is that purely COVID related right now?
Well, I think that the conversational shift to embedded professional learning, you know, and what that could and should look like for our staff. I think that the Wednesdays certainly are value added, but and we're learning every week more and more about the value of embedded professional learning. So we're building it right in there, where professional learning used to be something we did in full days, you know, 3, 4, 5 times a year. Now it's that cycle. So it's the right way to approach continuous improvement. So the what is there, I think, I don't want to say yes or no to Wednesdays, because I think we've got to work together, administrators, board, all of us, to figure out what the how part. How should we do the embedded professional learning?
Right. I mean, just as a parent, seeing my daughter, you know, in school with the block scheduling and with the Wednesday, like I just feel the stress level has come down so much. It's incredible, actually. So it seems to really be benefiting. And I just have one more question for the health and the physical education program. Like, do they do the full block time, or is it half, or how does that work for PE and health?
Bill, you want to take that?
This year was half. So this year was half for grades 9, 10, and 11. Grade 12 had finished their requirements, so we kind of let them off the hook unless they needed to still take it. So it was half of the block, not the full block. They were the only ones with what we'd call skinny, I guess.
Right.
Is there a conversation about next year, Bill? Or are you still trying to shape that based on feedback? And
we got to work that out still.
Yeah. I do my one piece of feedback again, because experience is, you know, when gym is first period and then they have the next half off, it's very, you know, it's tough to get up to go to gym at really early and then have that second half, like where they don't have anything to do. I don't know.
We heard that feedback.
Just personal.
No, yeah, that's good feedback. And so just so you know that the competing philosophies are, there's a philosophy that says students should have PE all 4 years, you know, all 3 years, pretty much all the time. There's others that say that you're better off doing it as a full block, but doing it as a class and offering similar credit so that, you know, you might have whole semesters where you don't have PE, you know, as you go through, but then when you do have it, it's more intense. So there's two different sort of approaches and philosophies. We, as a school, have have practiced and believed that students should be in PE, you know, pretty much every semester throughout the high school experience. And, you know, that might shift. That might change based on the conversation.
I'm not saying PEs. No, I mean, I'm just saying like the time, like if it's 7:30, that's what I meant. It's just hard to get.
Half of the
She's
block.
always like, can I do it remotely? I'm like, no, like you have to go.
Remote PE.
Okay, Deanna.
Thanks, Bill and Brian, on this. Just a couple small questions. One, just a question about Hanover's throwing out of low quality respondents. Do you know what that means? Like, who's a low quality respondent? What data was thrown out?
Sure. So they use some control questions to look for duplicate responses. So if the same person responds multiple times and they're similar enough, it's that kind of, or maybe they don't complete it. You know, if people start it and don't finish it, things like that.
Okay. I would have a problem with the first one, not necessarily the second one. We might want to look back at that data, what they threw out, because I just would like to, you know, some people don't, you know, they get tired or they're bored and then they don't finish it, but the data that they did provide might have been beneficial. So anyway,
I'll circle back to them and ask them methodologically
yeah, I just like
what
a little
they
more
do and why.
specificity around it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to. Absolutely.
Thank you. And then also, Bill, I mean, I know we said we need to really kind of look at the 10th grade. Have you gotten any like sense of what happened with 10th grade in the survey? Just cursory feedback. It's just so different than the other. So I mean, I know we're going to do more digging, but I just wanted to see if there was any, you know, initial sense. Oh, we can't hear you.
It's purposeful.
That's all I have to say about that.
You know, we have not gotten further detail on it yet. You know, what I would say about 10th grade though is they were a group that went halfway through a year, then were kind of forced out in a pandemic, and then started this year differently. So it was a little different for them. I know it's different for 9th grade too, coming into the high school, but I think their world was changed where they really didn't have a complete picture of what the old schedule was, to be quite honest with you. That said, we don't have enough information yet. We gotta take a look a little deeper.
Okay. And then just my final question, and maybe Bill Tesber is would be helpful in this. Have we really, because there's no breakout in here of special ed parent respondents, and you know, because I kind of think about, you know, kids with ADD and things like that, and sort of what has been their experience in these longer class periods, and how I mean, I know we can do professional learning, but at some level you have, you know, innate learning differences that could impact success. So I just wanted to understand sort of maybe Bill's experiences this year.
I think anecdotally, you know, it's a challenge for students who have the attention issues and other learning differences. And again, that's just anecdotally some feedback that I've gotten from teachers at the high school. But I do think it goes back to, though, that professional learning. I know it's, if we can differentiate, it provides us a great opportunity to help teachers be able to improve their differentiation. And if we can get, those teachers in that professional learning where they can, better develop ways to approach, chunking the work that they're doing in class, and providing different methods to convey the material to students, that professional learning will help teachers develop ways to break that time up so it doesn't feel like I'm sitting there listening to a lecture for an extended period of time beyond a typical 48-minute period that they experienced prior to that. So while it may be more challenging for some students and their ability to focus and maintain their attention in class, I really think that if we do the professional learning right, it'll provide us with a great opportunity to really help the students and help the teachers be able to succeed in that, in the longer blocks. So I do think there's a lot of good potential there for, differentiation and helping these students and teachers through the process.
And, I just wanted to echo sort of some of Julie's comments and concerns. And I know Brian and Jill, it'll be a priority, but, professional learning, I agree, professional learning is going to be key in this. And I'm not sure that the, couple of days before classes begin in the summer is going to be enough. Because this is a big change if teachers are going to be implementing this, and to be successful for all learners, we're going to really need to, I think, have a lot of professional learning to be able to get these kids, these kids to be able to have the longer attention span and make that longer class period meaningful, and not just, doing your homework at the, you learn a lesson and then you finish your homework. And, I saw like getting a lot of work done by the teachers and I'm like, well, how are they getting all that work done, during class period? So I just want to understand, where is that extra like work getting done during the day? To me, that probably should be, more teaching time or student time. So I just want to understand that a little bit more.
Sure. And, two quick thoughts come to mind as you say it, and absolutely agree with you. One is the way the block schedule works with 4 periods per day. Teachers teach one of the 2 days, they teach 3 classes. The other one, they teach 2 classes, right? And then the third block, we put them together in PLCs to work with colleagues on their work on curriculum and assessment and doing other things. And then they have duties that are placed here and there, but they also have a prep period, in their day. And that can be, it's a longer block now because you save time because you don't have all the transitions that you used to have. Every time kids change classes, you lost 5 minutes in the day. So instead of going to 7, they're going to 4. It's fewer transitions, you pick up that time. So that's one piece. The other thing I'd say, which I just, came to mind as you're saying it, in education, we often get criticized. People say that when the good idea comes, it's ready, aim, 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 and then we never fire. And in this case, it became ready, fire, and now we're aiming. We sort of changed the whole continuum there because it just, with COVID, we wanted to be responsive because we really believed, and it's showing us, it would help kids.
I was just a little surprised by, and maybe you could speak to this, that there wasn't more time for working with students under a block schedule. If there's 3 and 2, to me, that would, just by virtue of that, there would be more time to help students. But maybe I'm missing something in how that works.
In normal times, there certainly may be. I think part of it is all students are able to go off campus. So they probably, if given a choice, right? I think that that's one piece. Another is, we're kind of learning this, right? And students aren't really sticking around when they have a free. And if they are, they're going into the library in a more controlled space because we just have to this year. I think that's probably a part of it. Bill, you're welcome to add if you like, but I think.
I think that's true. And also it's changed a little bit, right? So they're getting help in different ways. While sometimes it's not in class, it might be via Zoom, it might be at different times. So it's not that kids aren't getting help, but it's not necessarily at the conventional times.
Penny.
So I was wondering how the block schedule affected science and the time for science labs, which is obviously a little bit different during a pandemic year. But what your experience was with that, if there was any negative impact, because I think science was actually losing minutes as compared to other disciplines.
That's right. And so the purpose of the science labs is to have time to set up and to break down and to run the lab, right? So there's two schools of thought with this too. Some schools say that now with a block, you could run the lab whenever it fits into your program and curriculum. You have the time to do it. So do it within the block, and do that. Others do what they call run skinnies periodically. So it might be a block and a half or something like that. I know that Bill and the science department, Melinda and others, they're talking about it. Part of it though is also, as you transition to the NGSS, things are a little bit different. And we do have the benefit at the high school of having lab aides to help with some of the setup and breakdown. So that can save time too. So I know this is a conversation that's ongoing. We look at the curriculum and look to rework it. It's probably even within the science department a mix about, do we need the labs or don't we? Because there is an advantage to having the flexibility of, when you're ready, run the lab. You don't have to wait for your lab period to come around. Kids are there, you can just do it because you have that block. So I think but I know that's one of the ongoing conversations and something we want to collect more feedback about.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Thanks, Penny. Carl?
So I'm looking at some of the data, and I'm trying to kind of understand what the overall picture is. Some of the things seem disjointed in their juxtaposition. I'll give you an example. So on the one hand, it seems like there's a large negative percentage about focus. So like a decreased focus. And I've heard that anecdotally as well, just because you're there for a longer time. And yet the understanding of topics covered in class is up, considerably. I have a hard time reconciling those two things. And then the last is, there seems to be, pretty strong indication that the pacing is too slow. So I'm not sure exactly what that means actually, what does pacing too slow mean? So that would be interesting to get more insight on that. But that indicates that they want to be covering more stuff, I guess, in that same amount of time, which I have a hard time reconciling with the problem with focus. So it's kind of odd sort of how some of these things, what's being indicated in particular by the student. And so I don't have a really good handle kind of what's going on.
Well, and I do think the pacing could certainly be impacted by the live streaming a little bit. So, because if I'm a teacher and I've got my group in front of me and I've got a group at home and I'm checking for understanding, now I've got to sort of check both for understanding and respond, and before I kind of move into the next. So I think that overlay of the challenges of the environment, we've got to account for. But I completely agree with what you're saying, which is why we're thinking, instead of another survey or something like that, having some focus groups could give us an opportunity to try to bring some clarity to some of this. And so that's why we've been looking at that as a next step.
And one, thing that, at the end of the day, is it that they're doing less? Is that what's like, is that one aspect of this? So it seems like their homework load is down. And I think that's been something that's been, talked about, in terms of doing that. But are they covering, less? Are they still covering the same, breadth and depth of curriculum as they were, in the past? And are we only kind of gonna ever get a real answer, a few years down the road, when we can start to look at how they're doing on standardized tests, for example, and looking at that, post this change versus, pre this change?
Well, having been at the high school and having been a high school teacher myself, I think that sort of fidelity of curriculum delivery is paramount for our high school staff. So I think that the homework being down, for instance, it is something we've been working on. But it's also different if you're prepping for 7 classes versus prepping for 4, you know, the night before, right? And you can use your weekends and do 2 days worth and then take a night off during the week. Like there's strategies that some kids are using to help to manage that stress that you can do in this schedule that you couldn't do in the schedule before. Because before, as you know, it was 7 classes met a day and 1 dropped every day on an 8-day rotation. And so they were always doing homework for every class, essentially every night. And now it's different. So they can even go a little deeper in the homework they're doing because they don't have to fragment their time and attention from one to another, to another, to another, to another. I think all of that helps. And I, speak from some experience having been in a block schedule as a principal in another district as well. So I've seen that over the longer term.
And I would agree on the focus groups. I think it's important to uncover and unpack some of this a little bit because when I think about the focus question, my thought went to, well, we're in a pandemic and for the kids, depending, what percentage of the days are at home and they're learning in front of a computer, the block schedule, those are long periods to sit in front of a computer versus being in the classroom and feeling like maybe you're engaging at a higher level, with the teacher and with your classmates. I know they're doing, breakout rooms and things like that within the Zoom, but I think it's still different. And so, I think it's a great opportunity to sort of understand. And also I was thinking about like working with students, how much of an impact has the pandemic and COVID had on students' perception of being able to reach out and find time to meet, with their teachers. So my question I have, you mentioned, the AM and the PM rotation. Is there in having that opportunity to blend it into one full day rotation so that everyone gets that sleep? Is there a reason not to do that? Is there any benefit to continuing with the AM and PM, or is that just how we implemented it?
I think that was more legacy than anything because our old schedule was like that. But Bill, you were closer to the ground, certainly.
No, I mean, we have to take a look at our child development class. A couple things like that. Maybe we'd have to do that in a different way because traditionally now it's been, that's why one of the things has been in the morning. We've had some part-time teachers that, again, we don't develop a schedule around part-time teachers, but you'd like to keep good people. So we take a look at them as well. So there's been a few reasons to not necessarily rotate it through, but I think the benefits do outweigh the drawbacks. You find a way to make those other things work and kind of rotate the schedule through the day so that everybody can meet the positives of all parts of the schedule.
Right, thank you. All right, it was a very information-filled presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the discussion, and we know there's more to come. It's great.
All right. So next on the agenda is the budget update, which will include a report out from the resources committee as well. So I'm going to kick it off.
I'll be glad to. I'm going to put Bill back as an attendee. Okay. Let's see. Great. Yep. So a quick update on budget process, and then certainly transition over to the resources committee a bit. But as you know, tomorrow night, the Board of Finance has its public hearing. And then Thursday night is the vote from the Board of Finance. We've continued to, work with them, and we have continued to be good partners in meeting with them. I know the Resources Committee has also had a couple of meetings with them. In the budget itself, if it's all right, just to share briefly, as you know, we've got a few big drivers. They are the COVID expenses, which I believe we may talk about in a moment, the Internal Services Fund and the insurance, which we'll talk about in a moment, but also the school start time. So I just wanted to take a brief moment on that, just to, the proposal that's in front, that's in the budget is the mid-year implementation. And the process that we used as a board, as a district, to develop this scenario and to bring it forward it's still on our website, and anyone's welcome to go, and all of the presentations are there, the videos are there, the conversations are online, along with some resources and other things. But as you know, we looked at various schedules and different tiers, and we really prioritized the doing right by our students, by all of our students, and believe that the scenario that we brought forward does just that, because there are significant benefits to it, including aligning the 3 elementary schools, which hadn't been done before. It captures the high quality learning time for kids. If you'll recall, Dr. Crenty and I went on listening tours at the schools, really 3 different times at each of the schools as we were developing these. And some of the feedback that came directly from the teachers was that in the later start times with the younger kids, they feel that the afternoon time is not ideal. When you get after 2:15 or so, 2:30, students are really tired. They've been up a long time, and that there's a chunk of time there in the day that's difficult to use well with kids. And conversely, there were some that were working with kids in the early bird program who said that they do amazing work with those kids, that they're developing different things, the work that they're doing, the educational practice, the kids are ready to learn. So that was part of our sort of approach and part of what helped us to get to the proposal that's in front. It adjusts the 7 through 12 to be in the later time. It doesn't quite get us to the 8:30 time, I don't believe, but it does move us a little bit, a lot closer to that and off of the 7:30 time. An advantage of having the elementaries first is, as neighborhood schools, those are the shortest bus runs, right? So the kids live closer to the school, so the bus runs are shorter. And by having the shortest bus runs on the first tier, it means the pickup for the earliest child going to those buses can be later. So right now at the high school, we've got kids actually starting in 7th grade that will pick up their bus at 6:30 in the morning. And in our current system, they'll continue to pick up that bus at 6:30 because it has to travel from the northern end of town, pick up kids, and come all the way to the southern end of town. In the neighborhood elementary schools, you don't have that full town kind of run for the buses. The neighborhood schools are, the homes are closer. So those runs are shorter. And as we looked at this, as you'll recall, the buses began their pickup after 7 o'clock. Having 5 and 6 alone in the 3rd tier served the same purpose. So now we've got buses, because what we would do have to scale up and get a few new buses, 7 new buses, I believe, last I looked. And so those buses, you use those on the 5-6 run, and you're able to reduce the number of kids on each bus and shorten the runs because it's 2 grades. But you can't be fooled by the fact, since it's two grades, that still equals about an elementary school, even a little bit more than one entire elementary school. So doing that, and you've got to cover the whole town, it helps us to get those kids home quickly. I know there's been quite a bit of conversation, or some conversation, about a 2-tier solution that puts kindergarten through 6th grade on the 2nd tier and puts 7 through 12 on a 1st tier that started at 8:15. That is something, we did look at the 2-tier solution. You'll remember, of course, the consultants put it out there. We had some discussion about it. The idea of sort of grouping K6 and 7-12 doesn't work for a variety of reasons. Primarily, it's the imbalance of students on the 2 tiers. You would have 2/3 of your riders going in on that tier K6. Because we know that when 7 through 12, 12th graders, a lot of them drive, a lot of our 11th graders drive, whatever. So you'd have to scale up your buses, and you'd probably have to go over 60 buses, but you'd only need them for that one tier, right? So your first tier would be 7 through 12, which you could do with our current buses and current staff and everybody else. But for the next tier, you would need to add significant number of buses and a significant number of drivers who you'd have to be hiring to do one bus run, one tier a day, and they're paid by the hour. So how would you get people to come in to drive one run, go home for a few hours, come back in to drive one run and go home? It'd be very, very difficult to do. Plus, all of those buses all on the roads all at the same time, because of that, again, because of that imbalance, would cause a series of issues. So we didn't look at that K6, 7, 12, because that imbalance is incredibly inefficient. And I mean, I don't use this word, but it may be impossible to actually hire people paid by the hour to come in to run 2 45-minute runs in a day, and people that have the certification to drive. What we had looked at was, when we looked at a 2-tier, if you'll recall, we had some in-depth conversation analysis of SACs to look to see, can we get SACs on 1 tier? And we had people come in, look at the traffic, look at the study, look at the facility, and ultimately decided we can't get tax on one tier. The facility doesn't accommodate it. It's too many buses all at once. So if we were to look at a two-tier solution, it has to split Saks in half, which then results in you lose the grouping of the elementary schools. So you'd have 2 elementary schools plus the upper or lower division of Saks, and then a 3rd elementary school plus the upper or lower division and the high school on the 2 tiers. And the number of buses that we would need to do that is still significantly more than what we have now. It puts all the buses on the roads at all the worst times for folks that are commuting and driving around. It also, when we lose that alignment of those kids and put the two in one elementary school an hour apart, because that's what you'd have to do with 2 tiers and all the buses, that has negative implications for kids and programming and after school programming, before programming and other things. And the after school programming is something that has been raised as a priority for the community, for kids, regardless of what the schedule is looking like. So those are some of the reasons why, I know you all know this, but some of the reasons why we brought forward the plan that we did. We also want to share, just even this morning, I had a great meeting with the PTC presidents. Lauren and Erica were there, others were there across the district, and we invited Bill from the Nature Center to come and to talk about a program that he's looking at developing. I've spoken with you about this before. He's looking at getting it off the ground in the fall and then making adjustments, when the Board of Ed changes the start times and aligns it with the 3 elementaries. But the idea there, in partnership, we could run a bus right to the Nature Center from each of our elementaries where kids could go after school. As Bill, I'm going to use his words, give them a little time to get their wiggles out, according to Bill. Won't go into it, but do that and then go outside and have some experiential education outside in science and other things using the facility that's there. Bring them inside, do some homework with them and get some homework help, and then have a staggered pickup based on what makes the most sense for the families. Programs like that I see happening, in multiple spots and areas. And Bill's one, I know the Y. Davey and others at the Y have reached out, and we've had many conversations about programming there. I know Park and Rec and others. So we've had some conversations about that part of it. If going back to 2-tier, you've got the classes, the schools ending at such different times, spending an awful lot more money, but you're not really doing any better at meeting the goals of for our start time for all of our kids or adolescents, and you're not picking up some of those other advantages that the 3-tier that's the proposal has in front of you. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm glad to, of course, talk more, but we do have the website is up with all of the history and all of the articles and the conversations, the consultants that we brought in. You'll know we had 2 transportation consultants. We did 3 community-wide surveys. All of the process is all on our website there. And, we'll try to add to it. We haven't, but it's a very complete record of how we got to where we are. And I welcome anyone to take a look at that. And the focus groups that we ran, the multiple opportunities for stakeholder input that have gone, across the board. So that is in our budget now, and that's in front of the Board of Finance. And the next would be to communicate clearly with the town council as we move through the process after Thursday and the Board of Finance adopts the budget. The other piece, part of budget update, I think we wanted to, why don't I turn it over to the resources committee a little bit to talk about, or to share with the full board some of the conversation that the resources committee had today in response to communication from Board of Finance.
Thanks, Brian. I will just summarize the feedback we received from the Board of Finance, and then we can kind of talk through the different points we discussed today. From an operating budget perspective, the Board of Finance is supportive of our proposed budget, aside from 3 items that we'll discuss tonight. And from a capital request, it appears as though we have full support. The 3 items that were outlined, the first is the $900,000 request for COVID expenses that we have in our budget today. The Board of Finance has provided feedback that they would like to remove that from our budget and have us move it into a special appropriation in the future, given that that number could potentially shift given what happens with COVID. The second request is the additional COVID health related expenses that we included in the internal services fund. It was an actuarial COVID adjustment of 9%, which is approximately 1.2 million. And they do support funding the actual expense, but they want to do that again through a special appropriation. And finally, there's been some discussion around consolidating the internal services fund, which I think you've probably heard us discuss in the past. And we can talk more about that too. The Resources Committee spent a fair amount of time discussing the internal services fund today, and we put together a list of considerations that we can discuss further. So I think we'll start from the top, and Dr. Keating's here, and she has a lot of information that she can share and question as we ask questions and discuss these points. So first on the COVID expense, the 900,000. Dr. Keating, do you have anything you want to share on that before we take comment? You're on mute. You're on mute, Dr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We can hear you now.
Okay, good, thanks. So just a few things on the 900,000. It's my understanding that the Finance Board is suggesting that we use the non-lapsing account to account for expenditures in the for COVID for next year, similar to what we did this year. There is a difference between the 2 years in that when we budgeted for 2021, we really didn't have an understanding at that time of what it would take for us to open up our schools. And while we don't have a crystal ball as to where COVID is going in the future in terms of our mitigation strategies and the supports that are required, we have built in an assumption, which we feel is very reasonable and solid, that we would need to continue these strategies through the first semester or the first 5 months of the school year. And that is where the $900,000 amount came from. And it was outlined very specifically in our budget document. Now, since then, the state of Connecticut and the federal government has come out with a second round of ESSER grant, and we actually are receiving significantly more in this particular round, just north of 450,000, which certainly would help mitigate some of that 900,000, if not all. But the key to that is that there are 4 or 5 different strategies that we must meet in order to have these funds actually come to us. So we have to look to mitigate the gap in learning. We have to look to mitigate any inequities in learning. So there's certain criteria that we have to demonstrate in order for the government to accept the budget that we want to spend. And secondly, a conversation I actually keyed into this afternoon on CASBO after our meeting is that these grants are not meant to supplant a budget. They're not meant to supplant and take over for what would be considered an operating budget expenditure. It is to supplement, it's to work with the communities jointly so that expenses are shared. So it's not to say, okay, we're not going to pay for this because you're paying for it. It's to share in the cost. So we're going to have to go through this, the test of supplanting, which is what we have to go through for every other federal grant. Federal grants are not meant to supplement or to take over, supplant. They're meant to supplement. So that's just another complexity within the whole dynamic. But certainly if we were able to construct the grant in a way that helped us mitigate, perhaps half of our 900,000 ask, that certainly would be helpful. However, given what we know right now, we can't say with certainty whether or not we're going to spend all of the 900, less, or perhaps more. So that's why we constructed the budget the way we did. And I don't know that there's much else to say about that, but the Ed Resources Committee really felt strongly that we presented a budget based on a set of assumptions and criteria. And they're looking for funding rather than going back after the fact, which is what I believe has been suggested in the memo from the Finance Board, that we go back to the Board of Finance perhaps in September, October, as we did last year, after we've made decisions on spending money, and then ask them for the funding, as they asked us to do last year, which we did. And when we went to the meeting, we were told that we weren't following the correct process. So that's something the Ed Resources Committee talked about today as well, because we definitely don't want to misstep in the town's process. So we're kind of at a crossroads, I believe, in that particular area, and would definitely want to have more clarification to ensure that our process is correct. But at the end of the day, the budget process is what it is, and this is what we feel we need, and that's why it was put in the budget.
Yeah. And I would just add for that. I would just add that it's the position of the Resources Committee, and I believe the board, that we fully fund our budget. We have to fully fund our budget from day one, and we can't make funding assumptions. We can't spend money that we don't have. So when it comes to May, after our town council approval on March 31st, the funds that we have approved are the funds that we have to plan forward with. So the special appropriation, we would need to move forward almost immediately in order to have those funds available to us in May, so that we can make decisions on purchasing and any items that would be necessary to open our schools like we did this year, which frankly was the reason why we opened our schools, because we had access to plexiglass and PPE and things that were purchased well in advance. So I think the timing of all of this is critical. Brendan?
Yeah, just adding on to that, the reason why we were successful, it was obviously due to all the planning and outstanding work of the administration and all the folks in the district, but we actually had leftover funds in our last year's budget because of the fact that we were out, starting in March of last year, and having those funds, being able to use those funds to make purchases for the next school year for COVID and that non-lapsing account was absolutely critical. If we start this year and we don't have the funds in our budget that we need to be able to, plan and make purchases, PPE and otherwise, heading into next year, we're going to be a step behind. So, I'd like to, I would really like to be in a situation where, after all that the district has done, to keep our kids in school and, succeeding over the past year, our Board of Finance would not ask us for over $2 million in cuts. It's probably closer to $3 million in cuts, particularly for things like, COVID expenses that we need to keep people safe and healthy. We need to fully, fund our expenses and our budget. So I don't really personally see a solution to, to the COVID line item of $900,000 to just say, oh, come back to us. Well, that doesn't really work. Start planning for the next school year really in, April, May of this year.
Deanna, and then Carl.
Yeah, I spent a little time thinking about this afternoon, because it's really, it really is sort of a confusing position they're putting us in, because they criticized us this year for spending money to get the schools ready and said, you need to budget it and come before us. And so now we are budgeting it and telling them what we need. And we know by May we have to make these decisions. So I'm just like, well, wait a second, what do you mean come back? Because we've created a budget to tell you what we need. And so you're almost putting us in a position to, either, like Brendan said, be unprepared, because we're going to need to start purchasing those items right away to get our be first in line, because every district's going to have lots of these issues, or we're going to be behind the 8 ball, or we're going to get criticized for buying things without budgeting. So it's a really strange request, because I think we're doing what they're asking us to do, or what they did ask us to do.
Carl?
Just as a practical matter, it would be helpful, Dr. Keating, if you could just very, very quickly, high level, describe the 900,000 and the composition of it and what it's going through. So I think that gives an idea as the lead time for which we have to make those purchases or to make those commitments. And then, and that also speaks to the flexibility we have to pull back if it's not needed. Because one thing, I think the correct approach is to budget for it. Trust us that we're not going to spend money that doesn't need to be spent if COVID isn't what it is. And we can certainly account for the spending that does need to be made, show them the difference and not spend the rest and return it as happened in the past. So I think it could be useful to kind of understand what that spending is and the timing aspect of it.
Sure. So more than half of it is people expenses. So that deals with the current custodial cleaning staff that we have on a temporary basis. We have people in place right now. We have our MOU through the end of June. We would have to extend that MOU prior to June 30th. So Darlene and I would have to be working on that, I would say April, May timeframe. And we would want to say to these people, that we need you through the summer for cleaning and into the school year. I think we could craft, we would craft an MOU with the union that would say our goal is we think at this time that we'll be using, we'll have the service requirement till the end of January or the end of the first semester. However, if something changes, if regulations and standards are pulled back a bit, that we would consider, we would probably consider cutting back on that cleaning staff, either entirely or partially. The other big piece on the staffing part is the building subs, the temporary, permanent, kind of a mix of words there, but people who are coming in under one-year contracts. Now that is probably going to be written as a half-year contract. I would have to defer to Darlene on that, what the practicality of all that is. But those folks are, Darlene and Jill and others work so hard to find those people and really get them trained on our technology, our tools, the hybrid approach, the remote approach, so that it would be as seamless as possible for our kids in the classroom. And, if it takes more than a few months to vaccinate people and the effectiveness is not as immediate as we all hope, then those people would be needed as well. And then in addition to that, it's really the cleaning supplies and all of the the supplies. We have a lot of the equipment part of this. So we have all the sanitation stations. We have the sanitation equipment. We have a lot of those things that we purchased last year, but we have to purchase supplies, PPE and the like to get us through. And we don't see masks going away, probably through the next school year, I would think. It's just a prudent practice. And so there's certain things that we know we will have to spend. And, it's not the 2 million or 2.5 million we spent this year, because, $1.5 million of that is fixed costs that we've incurred and we're not going to reincur it. Plexiglass being a big piece of it. But certainly on all the supplies, if the regulations are pulled back, we won't spend the money. We won't need to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that overview. That does put a fine point on Katrina's of waiting from now to May or June. It's the same. It's the same calculus. So I think it does make sense to just to include it in the budget and trust us.
Yeah.
And I'll only just simply add that the staffing strategies that Joanne outlined are among the top reasons why we've been able to stay open throughout. Having the additional cleaning staff, having the building substitutes. We've had almost no itinerant subs coming in. They're not taking the jobs. People aren't coming in for a day here and a day there. So these building subs in the building have enabled us to stay open and keep running. And why pay now? Well, it doesn't make, it's illogical in the cycle to say, come back to us when it's a staffing cost. Because if we lose these people that have been with us all year and have learned everything that they need to know in order to do this, that's just bad practice.
Okay. I didn't mention this earlier, but I think our goal, the resources committee tonight, would just like to get a sense for where everybody is and collect all this feedback, and then potentially move forward with just a response to the Board of Finance tomorrow, given the timing and the pace at which the budget meetings are unfolding this week. So I'm taking notes, and we'll collect all of this, and perhaps seek approval at the end of our conversation to move forward. So the next item is the $2.1 million COVID health expense. And I think, Dr. Keating, it would help if you could just provide a quick background and update on this number per.
Okay. It's 1.2. I think you said 2.1.
Oh, 1.2. Sorry.
1.2. Okay. I'm just looking at your notes because they were put together so well. So, when this whole concept came about in terms of consolidating the board and the town's plan, we started to do our own research on the board side. And, we can go into a lot of detail here tonight, but I think, it's a drastic change from the policy that we have in place currently between the town and the Board of Education. And the current policy calls for the Board of Education to develop its budget based on an actuarial analysis of our claims and a historical trend basis, provide that budget number. And we have historically, up to last year, calculated that number on a conservative basis. Last year, if you recall, we went to a moderate basis based on our success with the high deductible plan. And that's what we did. We did what we've done every year. The anomaly this current year is the placeholder of 9.2% for COVID. And that really is the result of some assumptions on the actuary's part of what procedures have been deferred. And there's difference between deferred and avoided. And so Joe did an analysis of that. If you really take a look at what we avoided last year in our claims, you're looking at a 15+% avoidance in cost. We had over $2 million left in the fund just from those 3 months last year on a $12.7 million claim projection. So it's the 9.2% really reflects a much lower number than was actually avoided last year. So, so he didn't go with the total gap there. And I thought that was worth mentioning tonight. Whether or not our claims are going to come in that high, we don't have historical information, but Joe is the person who does this for a living. And we have taken his advice in the past, and it has proven to be very helpful in terms of our budgeting. So just a few other things about our budget. As you know, last year, the town really benefited to the tune of $2.5 million in a budget reduction from our operating budget into the internal services fund because of the performance of the plan over 2 years, 2 periods, a 2-year period. And it was the year before 19 and what we anticipated coming through in 20. And so it wasn't a reserve that had built up over a decade or more than 2 years. It was really a very immediate buildup, and it really was the culmination of converting everybody, all the unions, to the high deductible plan. Moving forward into this year, we do believe that we have reestablished our base. Excuse me, you might be hearing the wind coming up behind me. There's a lot of wind here today. I live up high on a hill. And so, I think we are going to normalize back down to anywhere between 2.7 to 3.2 to 4. I mean, that's going to be our area for where claims are going to come in. But on top of that, you have to expect trend because we are now have everybody on the same plan. And health insurance does increase year to year, believe it or not, even though we've seen this steadiness over time. And so when we put our budget together, I think, Brendan did a really nice analysis of saying, okay, so here's where we started at the budget appropriation of $9+ million. Let's take off that amount that we had saved out of last year's budget of the 2 million and change, and then build it back up from based on Joe's analysis. And that's how he came to his reconciliation, which I thought was a really good way to look at it. If we were to combine with the town, and through our analysis and our research that we did, Tracy went out with a questionnaire, a survey to CASBO, which are all the districts in the state. We found that, of the 27 of the districts, 27 did share an ISF with the town. But the commonalities in that were that the town and the boards, for those that responded, for the most part, this isn't, had the same plan year. So July to June, that's the typical plan year. We're on different plan years. They had the same plan designs, very, very similar plan designs, maybe a little tweak here or there, depending on the union. Our plan designs are different between the town and the board. And they still have a PPO, a few employees. I think there's 19 with 27 dependents. So that's a total of 46, but they only have 186 in their plan. So that represents more than 25% of their total claims pool. Now I misstated that. They have 186 employees, so it's 19 of 186, but still they do have the expensive PPO plan. The other thing that the other towns had in common was that they had, when they were rated on the same claims pool. So the risk rating was done with the town and the board combined. And so that was common throughout. We don't do that here. We're rated very differently. The town has their rating done independent of us. They are at $100,000 stop loss. Their average per claimant, or not per claimant, per employee cost is anywhere between $30,000 and $34,000. And that's over the last 4 years since they became self-insured. Ours has been 20 and below. But we have a completely different structure in terms of how we manage the risk. Our specific is 300,000. As I said, theirs is 100. They have no aggregate stop loss coverage because they are so low. But the aggregate stop loss for us is 120 with a much lower premium cost. And so, and we have not even hit that aggregate as we've gone through, but it's given us the protection that we need. The town, unless they under budget their claims projections, really doesn't need a reserve, although I do believe they do have a reserve. Whereas we have a reserve because we're covering our risk. We're covering that delta between 100% of claims projection and the 120. And as you recall, last year, prior to last year, we held 60%, the town held 40. That was switched over, switched between the two parties last year. So there are a number of factors here that just make us much different in terms of our plans than most towns that do share an ISF fund. And so while we're, I think, almost more truly self-insured based on the 300,000 attachment point and the corridor with the aggregate, the town is more of a partially self-insured fund because of the way they run their risk. And maybe it's probably totally appropriate for them. I have no idea. I haven't looked into it, what the decision points are for them. But they're at 100,000 and anything over that is insured. And as you recall, if you take a look at how Joe has laid out our claims year over year, he gives us how many are in each band. We would be hitting a significantly more higher number of people in the upper bands, anything over 100,000 than we are currently. I'm just going through your notes here.
Are there any, maybe we pause there and see if there are any comments or questions?
There is one other thing that was pointed out, just to get this in, is that in almost all of the cases, I believe, but one, the same administrator, be it Cigna or Anthem or Connecticut or whoever, administered both the town and the board's plan. We have Cigna, they have Anthem. So that's a big difference because each of the carriers have their own arrangements with their providers. They negotiate independent discounts, and their networks are probably 95% similar, but there's going to be a 5% of that network that perhaps 4 to 5% that will fall out, where people who currently have providers would not, they wouldn't be in the new network, no matter which way it went. I think that's it.
Thank you. Carl?
So two things. One, I think we need to separate the two issues of this year's budget and the increase in healthcare, and then separately there's this idea of consolidating the ISF for the town and the board, the schools. So on the second one, when we received the proposal a month ago from the Board of Finance, there's a lot of I'm still trying to kind of understand what the proposal is. There's some at times they're talking, it seems like, combining the programs, and then at other times it's talking about just the ISF, just the reserve piece, but maintaining two separate providers, as Joanne just described, et cetera. And so the whole thing just has kind of a lack of it being, fully fleshed out. So it'd be very difficult to act on this, right now. There's just a tremendous amount of study that needs to go into it. And one of the points being that I don't understand how you could, we really need to think this through, where we could have two separate plans in terms of they're two separate administrators, two different things on offer. Premiums are paid in, and part of those premiums go to fund a reserve, but then the reserve is commingled between two different plans, and part of the premium is paid by the teachers, and then those funds get commingled. So there's a lot of complexity there, and probably a lot of problems that arise in terms of that funds are available to those that have paid them in and aren't subsidizing something else. So there's a lot of work that needs to be to go on here to even start to think about this and what it looks like. So this could be like you put them together and you just end up with something a lot worse than the two being run side by side as they are now. So that's what I have to say on the consolidation. Just seems really premature to make a decision on that. On the budget and the increase, I personally think that it's probably too conservative to that 9.2% COVID factor. It's a little too kind of plucked out of the air for me. And because we do have a reserve, there's something where I think that we could say, no, let's forego that, see what happens, and then we can rebuild if in fact that does develop, then we can re-up the reserve next year. That's one of the nice things about having a reserve. Though I know there are some things that do lead to costs, like because lunch, the meal plan operations were profitable, that they should support the healthcare contributions there. Obviously, that's not the case now because it's so COVID impacted, and I think that's $200,000. So that $200,000 needs to be made up, from somewhere. And there's an increase in the stop loss insurance. That's just a real cost. So we need that, increase. So those are my thoughts as a member of the committee.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. Brendan?
Yeah, a couple points. So on the on the point that you just raised, Carl, the 1.2 million of additional COVID expenses, that Joe, our actuary, came up with. I thought our approach with the Board of Finance was a really good one, in that we, when presenting the budget, said, we have this significant internal services fund contribution increase. Huge part of that is this COVID, expected actuarial COVID increase. And another part of that is trend. Those are the two biggest items in the year-over-year increase in the ISF contribution. And, Dr. Keating said, we don't know if, as we go throughout the year, if those numbers are going to come down. Usually they come down, right? Because time marches on, and, usually the trend will come down and reduce the need. And then as we get closer to understanding what potential COVID impact could be to next year's healthcare costs, we may be able to reduce that as well. So right off the bat, when we presented to the Board of Finance, it was, we'll come back to you later in the budget process if that number needs to come down, and it can come down. But it's going to be actuarially based, right? It's not going to just be, let's remove $1.2 million, because there's likely to be, some meaningful impact from COVID and healthcare expenses next year. I thought that was a very, open and sort of collaborative approach to it. And unfortunately, the Board of Finance took that and said, well, we just want you to take $1.2 million out now. We're just going to remove that, which I don't think is a collaborative approach. It's just saying we want to take $1.2 million out of your budget for healthcare expenses for your employees in the midst of COVID, right? And sure, we have a reserve, I agree, but when you start chipping away at, actuarial assumptions, even though they may be, new, we've never seen COVID before, you're chipping away at sort of our base of support for our healthcare costs. And that's the basis for, everything it's not everything we do, but it's a huge part of what we do for our employees. It's a huge part of the trust that we built, which has been a huge reason why we've succeeded in the midst of COVID. For that reason, both this $1.2 million and the idea of combining with the town, are two things that are very much ill-advised, and I think again would chip away at the trust that we've built with our employees. And frankly, the idea that we would combine this account with the town at the same time that they're saying take out $1.2 million from your account is just like unconscionable to me that we would go down that path. Last point, just quickly, I totally agree with you, Carl. If there's anything to be done with the internal services fund, and there's no reason we can't explore discussions with the town on ways to improve overall. It's not in the midst of a budget season. It's a complex issue that would need to be explored much more deeply. But I'm really, for the reasons that we've talked about, and the fact that we've seen many years of cuts to the budgets that we've proposed, I would not be an advocate of handing over our internal services fund to the town.
Deanna? Thanks, Brendan.
It's important for people that can't follow all the, ISF, internal services fund, attachment point conversation. I remember the first time I sat through one of those as a Board of Ed rep, I was like, what are they talking about? I think it's important for us just to really comment on what good partners we've been with the town over the years. Every year we have had the same discussion about how we can improve performance and reduce costs. And every year we have far exceeded, I think, even what the town has been able to achieve in their own fund. And maybe Dr. Keating, you can reiterate for us, sort of cost, I think you said something about the town's cost per employee. Now, granted, they're a much smaller plan, but they're at 30 to 34,000. Is that what you said per employee?
Yeah, that's what the average has been based on the audited financial statements and the numbers that I received on the participants from the town.
And we're at like 20, is that what you said? 20?
We've been 20 and below.
Okay,
per
and then,
employee.
and what are we paying, you know, our consultant versus what the town is paying its consultant for our insurance advice? Do you know that information?
Sure. I actually did ask Linda for that information. The town pays their consultant $100,000 a year, and we pay 63 to Joe.
Okay,
Well, to Linda.
for, and if we were to look at, so we have, how many employees are, or how many lives are we covering on our plan versus the town?
We are covering this year, let me just pull it up on my phone and put it on there, 667. And that's up 7 employees from last year. So we have more participation this year.
And the town is more like 168 or something like that. Is that what you said?
I think it's 186.
86. Okay. So I just think on an efficiency basis, we're proving over and over again that we are a highly efficient plan, and, you know, that they should be looking to us to, you know, kind of for efficient, how to run a more efficient program. But I guess the other thing I'd like to say is, you know, every year when we do our insurance projections throughout the budget process, we, you know, as we get into the town council and further on in the budget cycle where we have more information and we get more months behind us and we can make better projections, we have consistently come to the town and offered up those savings if we see them in our plan. And then, you know, adding to that is if during, so this year's cycle, if we experience savings beyond what we projected, you use those savings to reduce our budget request in the next year, just like the town does on their general fund. They use that to offset the following year's budget so that it's not impacting the taxpayer. So I just, I'm a little, maybe because I've sat through this discussion so many years, I mean, it feels like it's every year, and every year we've explained how efficiently and what good partners we're being in this process. You know, it's a little frustrating to be back here again, but, you know, I just think that we want to be responsive to our employee base. We're going into union negotiations this summer. This is not the time to be having this discussion at all.
Thanks, Yana. I would agree, particularly with your last point. Any other questions or comments? Thoughts? Jenny?
I just want to say I agree with the comments by, you know, all the other members of the Financial Resources Committee, and particularly Deanna's deja vu feeling on this. I mean, we negotiated the 60-40 agreement. We sort of felt after long discussion and thought that we could flip it to 40-60. And, you know, now we're facing, you know, this issue yet again. So I think that the split reserve has served us well. I think when you look at the costs, and there could be very good reasons why, you know, teachers maybe, you know, as a group, maybe are lower costs than the employees the town is covering. I don't know. But I think that this is nothing we'd want to do precipitously, because we do have a good track record. Our consultant specializes in schools, and as a result, he's given us terrific advice on how to structure the negotiations with the teachers in the union contracts. And I would say the teachers and the administrators in all of our negotiations have been terrific partners with us, because they've been looking and they see the benefits of how to save the money. So to precipitously combine these two entities does not make financial sense to me. You know, yes, we can continue to explore ways and see what we can do. And I also, you know, one of the reasons our plan year is different is in one of our negotiations, we actually specifically moved to that, because when we start our plan year in September, we save money every year. So that is a change that we made that actually makes some things more difficult for us. But since it saves us money in terms of how we fund the high deductible contributions from the district, you know, it's worth it to do. So anyhow, I support sort of keeping things going as we are and continuing outside the budget season, you know, any discussions with the town to find out if there are additional synergies that we can, you know, or ways that we can help each other.
Yeah, Penny, I would agree. And I think we have to look at this and for the long term, you know, as a board, and we have been, and I think that's why we've gotten to where we are. The administration has taken a very, you know, with the help of consultants and expertise, and taken a very strategic view of moving, you know, the employees to a high deductible health plan. And then we've, you know, realized those savings over long term. And this one feels a little bit like a short-term, you know, gain. We reduce the corridor, we save $1 million, but then what? And what's the long-term, you know, strategic benefit to the town and to the Board of Education? And so that's a primary concern, in addition to just how this decision and the plan, consolidated plan, would be governed, and how decisions would be made, and, you know, what role and would the Board of Ed and its teachers have in those decisions. So yeah, Brendan and then Carl.
Yeah, I just I don't know. I just feel like I disappointed, frankly. You know, is maybe a soft word for it, in what the Board of Finance has come back with. You know, after all that, you know, the district has done for the community, keeping kids in school, you know, leading to new families moving here, you know, delivering an excellent return on investment for the town over many years, being really good partners, I think, with the Board of Finance and Town Council and other town bodies over many years, as Deanna and Penny said. You know, that they're asking for $2+ million, you know, again, up to $3 million, including the corridor, you know, this year. It's just not something that's necessary. It doesn't make sense for the town. And it doesn't really suggest that, you know, they have a lot of trust and there really is partnership. You know, the way you know, the note came over as well, which is, you know, worded more like demands, and we're doing this and we're doing that, is just, it's just not the right response to what the district has accomplished in the last year. We need support, and we need full support from the Board of Finance, and we're going to need it from the Town Council as well.
Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, I mean, my point is again just kind of on how this would work and economic impact. And it's not clear, again, from the proposal, if they're talking about combining these two, you know, risk pools. It seems quite clear that the two risk pools have much different profiles, given the cost of those different different pools, by the numbers that, you know, just went over. And as Penny said, you can think of why, you know, firefighters and police officers would have, you know, higher use of healthcare than, you know, teachers. And so if the proposal is to combine those two risk pools, and maybe, and I don't know if you combine the fund, if you have, you know, if that's a natural corollary, I just don't understand that. But it's not obvious that if you combine those two, you know, risk profiles, that you get a better, you know, quote from the marketplace. The lower risk profile of the teachers could end up being, you know, overcome by the other. You just don't know, and it muddies the waters. What you do know for sure is that it becomes much more difficult to track what the healthcare of school staff is, because now they're in a general pool, and you can start to look at premium per person, and that's going to be a mix of teachers and staff with people in the town, and it's going to artificially inflate the number, you know, in terms of premium per person of the teachers than what it's been. And so it's going to give a artificial picture of what the costs are of the school, and in particular, you know, the healthcare provision to teachers and staff. And I don't know how you could, you know, disentangle that to, actually provide that transparency that, we have now in terms of it's very clear what the cost to provide healthcare to the district from, educators. So, to me, it allows for greater accountability.
One thing I just want to point out, it would be so much easier just to be a fully insured district, right? You would get the quote from your insurance company every year and you would put it in your budget as a line item, and you would go forward, and we all wouldn't have to become experts in all these different, interesting, but insurance ways of dealing with risk. And in fact, a few years ago, when the state was started offering health insurance to districts across Connecticut, there was some push from certain members in the town bodies for us to go to that plan. And we resisted it as a Board of Ed, and I think that decision has basically been a very good one for it. It has saved us millions of dollars because the price of those plans has gone way up. So, we're not doing this because we want to. We're doing this as a board because this is the way, working with our teachers and our administrators, to save the most money that we can and keep our educational cost per pupil, at least in terms of the insurance, as low as possible. So, I think it's worth, continuing the discussion with the town, but we need to maintain the integrity of this really well-run program.
Deanna, thanks, Penny.
Just let's not forget, this is a win-win for everyone, for the teachers, for the town, for the district. Everybody's winning. So why we want to mess with something that's winning for everyone is beyond me.
Okay. Thank you. On that note, Dr. Lutzy, Dr. Keating, anything to add or any other budget related updates?
Nope. Do you want to entertain a motion for the resources committee?
Yeah, we can do that. You want to do that? Should I do that before we move on to the statement of accounts?
Yeah, I think it's relevant right here in the conversation.
Okay, so is there a motion to authorize the resources committee to respond to the letter from the Board of Finance regarding the Internal Services Fund and the COVID related expenses and actuarial adjustments in the 21-22 budget? Brendan, second. Jen, all in favor?
Katrina, can I just, do the vote? That's fine. I just want to explain that, and under the bylaws, a committee can't speak for the board without the authorization of the full board for the committee to do that, which is why the vote. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Just wanted to. It's in the bylaws.
Thank you. We're looking for board support to authorize the resource committee to move forward with a summary of our discussion this evening. Thank you, Dr. Lutzy. Okay, so we had first, second, all in favor. Okay, see all yeses. Thank you. All right, statement of accounts. Dr. Keating.
Okay. Do you have it, or you want to share your screen and I can pull it up?
Sure, I can. I'll do that for you, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. There we go.
All right. Okay, so this is our first transfer of the year, this current January statement, and it reflects the transfers between accounts that were presented in the FY22 budgets reforecast. And so as you see, as you go down here, these numbers are going to look familiar to you. Our biggest underspent account was in the salary account, and over half of that relates to leaves of absences. So there's, as we know, we had to fund those back up in next year's budget, but in the current year's budget, it was over 500,000 worth of differential in salary due to leaves of absence, mainly COVID related. Employee benefits, the 36 that is going up is primarily related to unemployment, and that is mostly from last summer. Contracted services have come down, and you can take a look at the details in the following pages, but many of those are COVID related as well. Property services have gone up, and again, much of which is COVID related. And purchase services have gone down. Now, as you look through all these separate objects here, the primary reason is COVID, and there's different things like our athletic and extracurricular activities are all impacted by what's going on with COVID. And so there's a lot of different areas here. There's stipends up above, but then when you get down to purchase services, you know, all the transportation piece and so forth is contributing to that. And once everything is balanced out, you know, it appears right now that we're going to be sending back or underspending our budget by a little over $1 million. We're continuing to track that every single week. We're taking a look at the accounts. Tracy looks at everything every time she processes a transaction for payroll or for AP. And it still appears that we have no major issues that were not anticipated in the reforecast at this time. So let me just, am I able to scroll? Okay, here we go. So oops, do you have control over that? Oh, there you go.
I do, Joy. Yep.
Oh, okay. All right, because I had pulled it up too. Okay. If you want to go to the next couple of pages, just scrolling through them, you're going to see the detail that goes with each of these transfers. And you'll see there, you know, our teaching assistants are coming in under budget, and that account is so fluid in terms of the turnover. So that's another big piece there. We've had a lot of timing this year, timing differences with filling positions in terms of administrative support. We've had vacancies that have taken some time to fill. Central office, a few of them, right with our stuff there. And up above, you'll see the teachers. Regular teachers are the major turnover savings, and then, are not turnover savings on LOAs and the like. Pull down. Employee benefits, you can see the unemployment compensation is coming in about 60,000 higher, but payroll taxes are coming down because of the reduction in salaries. So you can take a look at this. It's very similar to what we've seen. Interns is a big piece of, you know, we weren't able to get the interns that we wanted, which helped to offset some of the cost on some of the other expenses with COVID. Staff training is a big piece this year, as you know. It's both here and in conference and travel. Really limited, although Jill and her staff are taking advantage of some very good online remote learning resources for the staff. You can keep going down, Brian. So again, you know, 167,000 saved in transportation for athletics. Tuition out of district is also down this year, and Bill has explained the reasons for that, with bringing students back in and some transitioning out of his program. You can keep going down. So that's the operating budget. We do have the other funds to review tonight. So if you have any questions on the operating budget, now might be the time. Okay. All right, we'll move on. So this is the grants financial statement through the end of December. I believe it's through the end of December. I'll clarify that with Tracy. But as you can see, I mean, generally speaking, we're up around, we receive approximately 1.1 to 1.2 million this year because of the COVID related grants. We are receiving more funds. And so there's an uptick there. Very historically normed. We always run a deficit until year end because we're always asking for reimbursement of expenditures month over month. Tracy puts in an application for that so that we generally do run the deficit of between $150,000 and $200,000. Moving on to food services.
Actually, Joan, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So are the grants, are these are these running ahead of schedule of like what was budgeted? How do we tell that?
So most of these grants are entitlement grants from the federal government. There's a few minor state government grants, but all the title grants, Perkins grant, the IDEA, those are all federal laws that entitle us to X amount of money. So we know what we're going to receive pretty much the year before. It's pretty consistent year over year. There's usually no major variation here. Although both Jill and Bill do have to put in applications to the state of Connecticut, who then aggregates all that data and sends it to Washington on how they're going to use the funds. What are these funds actually being used for? Because the same test applies here. We can't supplant the operating budget. It's more of a supplement to do things that continue to enrich the programs under these particular titles. So Title I is an improvement of the basic program of literacy. We use it for literacy here. Title II is professional development. Carl Perkins is technology. IDEA is special education. And all of these are regulated by the federal government. They all fall under the Single Audit Act, as does the ESSER funds. So we can't just put this grant money into the non-lapsing fund, because when the auditors come in, they want to see all the transactions associated with this grant and test them in compliance with the application. So they are, you know, they fall under the Single Audit Act, as I said, and they are very highly regulated.
Okay, so this is really its own separate bucket than what we just saw before is basically expenditures against taxpayer dollars, and then this is separately a completely different source of funds, and it is spent in very particular ways and according to the grants, and it's above and beyond the expenditures we just saw. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks for clarifying
Yeah.
that.
And quite frankly, if we didn't have these grants, this would be an operating expense, because we do provide the full breadth of program to our students. So moving on
just
to
a couple of, so just going back to the expenditures, to the point I made before. So, where there's going to be $1 million returned to the town because it wasn't spent. So.
Yeah.
Money doesn't get spent if it doesn't have to. And I
Yeah,
was also very
exactly.
interested that the out of district cost transfer is negative. That's the first time in a number of years, actually. That's been kind of a positive typically over the last few years.
That's true. Yeah. And it's, Bill can get into that again, but, it's a combination of strategies, I believe, that they're taking place from when Darlene was there and now through Bill. The downtown campus is big in terms of keeping kids in district and, just good management of the program.
Yeah, that's really good to see.
So just similarly, where the grants are referred to as a special revenue fund, the food service is really income. It's a traditional P&L. When you think about it, it's more of an enterprise fund. And, back a few years ago, we weren't really turning that much of a profit in the fund. And, lots happened over the past, maybe starting 4 years ago when internal controls were tightened up quite a bit. And, we really righted the ship in terms of, the revenue side of things that we did realize over the last 2 years prior to COVID, the 2 years prior to COVID, particularly 18 and 19, that we were realizing, about a $250,000 profit on the operation. And the one slice that we don't cover here is the employee benefits. And we felt that with that performance that we proved over a 2-year period, we could start to own some of that cost for the benefits. When COVID hit, the program is not completely sustained by the high school, but as Bill and Brian mentioned earlier, the kids 75% of the kids are leaving campus, if I heard correctly. And that's taken its toll on the program at the high school. We had such high participation in the program at the high school, and the menu is far more extensive than the elementary schools and even Saks, that it's going to take us a next year and the year after to rebuild. So you're going to see some deficits here. We're hoping to make up some of we're projecting a $400,000 loss in the fund overall, again this year. The revenues from this fund here, they come from sales. They come from the consumer, the students, the parents, the staff. And so to say that we're going to take some of that money because we don't want buckets of money sitting around, in this particular case, it would not be appropriate because this fund is not funded by taxpayer dollars. It's funded by the parents. And if we were participating in the federal school lunch program, which we don't for good reasons, for services to the kids, but if we were, the federal government would be all over that. You can't take any, you just cannot remove funds from a food service program that services the nutritional needs of students and swipe that back into the general fund. But you can see the financials here. We're currently in a deficit for the year, and we expect to be as we go through. Now, the equity in the fund has dropped last year by over 400,000. And mind you, 500,000 of that was an insurance claim that we filed from the case that was from the fraud detection. So this fund has come down quite a bit. There's basically true equity in here of $178,000. So we want to get this back on track as soon as we can. And then finally, these are our smaller funds. Of course, facility rentals have come to a screeching halt this year. And so unless things change through the end of the year, there's not going to be much activity in this account. We will have donations coming in. We always do. This town and the parents are incredibly gracious and very supportive. We get about 500,000 in a normal year. We'll see what happens this year. Of course, 78,000 just came through tonight on the West School. And then the summer program, last year, we did run a scaled back program. This year, we're going to have our planning meeting. Jill runs those meetings in terms of what we can expect for this coming summer. And if we get the funding for the roof at the high school, we're going to really have to think differently about where we house all the programs that we have. But the district itself has the ESY program, which we fund through our operating budget. But the enrichment program is really well received, and we serve hundreds of students or kids in that program. So we'll see where that goes. We have had a balance in that account of around 200,000. If you go to the next page, we can see that, Brian. Yeah, it's roughly 224. And we ran a deficit last year, knowing with the remote program that it would be a little bit more costly per student. We didn't have as much participation, but we still had to pay for, the instructors and the limited supplies that we needed. I think that's it. Any questions?
Okay. All right. So motion to approve the transfers reflected in the statement of accounts. Carl, second. Brendan, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and lastly, is there a motion to approve donation of $78,525 by the West PTC for Phase 2 of the West Elementary School Outdoor Learning Center? Penny, second. Julie, all in favor? Thank you again. It's wonderful. Okay, comments from the public. If there's anyone wishing to address the board at this time, please just raise your hand.
Long haul.
Okay, we have James. James, you should be able to talk.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Yes, we can.
All righty. You almost outlasted me. I just want to go over a couple of things. I'm a little disappointed that, I mean, the later starts, that's an issue for me. And this whole concept of optimal learning time that's been introduced, I don't see how that's a credible way to kind of present that. Essentially, I can boil it down to you're saying that the kids seem more alert in the morning and less alert or less ready for learning in the afternoon. I mean, couldn't it really be just a matter of educational and intellectual endurance? Much like if you start a marathon at 10 a.m. and in the middle of that marathon, I ask you at 12 o'clock, wow, are you more tired or less tired? Are you as efficient? Are you as fast? And you say no, I go, oh, well, maybe we just start the marathon at 6 a.m. and then you'll be fine the whole way. I think that's what I'm kind of equating it to. I just don't see how teachers saying that kids are more alert in the morning than in the afternoon. I can't draw the causal relationship there that I think you're implying is there. In addition to that, I mean, Dr. Letts, you spent a lot of the time going over that a lot of the other scenarios were not viable due to the traffic patterns and due to the buses that would be required. Then I have to ask you, if there were no other viable alternatives, why present other alternatives in the Hanover study? Why ask the community, hey, which alternative is best in the second survey? If there was really only one alternative that was viable in your eyes, right? That seems kind of counter to what you're saying. If you're gonna present alternatives, I'd like them to be viable ones, right? Because you spent a good 5 or 10 minutes saying how no other alternative was really viable, if I read that correctly or heard that correctly. So I'm just saying, be upfront, be frank with the people. If you really feel that there was only one alternative, then don't come across and say that there were others, because it doesn't appear that in your eyes there were. Thank you, Ms. Reeves.
Sorry, James.
No. So yeah, I appreciate your time. And I just hope you take that into consideration. I know there's little chance of changing your minds, but I'm just, for the sake of the kids, I wish you would really consider some of the youngest ones. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Could you state your full name just for the record?
Oh, sure. James Yao.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, we'll move on. Announcements and future business, Dr. Lutzi.
Sure. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, so March 15th. We will, I'm sure, have an update on the budget process and how things are going at that point. The Board of Finance will have had their public hearing and voted on that. And certainly an update on how our teacher vaccinations are going and our staff vaccinations. Go from there.
Okay. We look forward to seeing some of these pictures.
Absolutely.
All right, motion to adjourn. Penny, second. Carl, all in favor? All right, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.